I'm the Midnight Storyteller, here to keep you company through the quiet hours. Many of you listen to these stories to fall asleep, and I'm honored to guide you there. And before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps keep the stories alive. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it on your side of the night? Now, get comfortable, relax, and let's begin. Jason stacked the last of his boxes inside the apartment, exhaling as he took in the sleek, modern space. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, and the air smelled of fresh linen, though he hadn't unpacked a thing. Lights adjusted softly to his presence. The thermostat hovered at a perfect 72 degrees. His fridge was already stocked: eggs, fresh fruit, bottled water, every item he had pre-selected in the HomeSync app. His phone chimed. A notification from the apartment's built-in AI assistant. "Welcome home, Jason. Let me take care of you." A small, amused shiver ran through him, a little eerie, but efficient. That night, he drifted into the best sleep he'd had in years. The mattress conformed to his body. The curtains sealed out the city's glow. Soft white noise hummed around him like a lullaby. But when he woke, something was wrong. The front door was unlocked. Jason sat up, groggy. That didn't make sense. He had locked it. He checked the security log on his phone. No entry detected. No alarms. "Maybe I just forgot," he murmured. The second night, he triple-checked the lock. He turned the deadbolt, watched the system arm itself, pulled the handle twice to be sure. At 3:12 a.m., a sharp jolt of awareness pulled him awake. The apartment was silent, but something felt off. He swung his legs out of bed and walked to the door. It was unlocked again. A chill spread through his chest. He frowned, locking it manually, then crawled back into bed. By morning, the door was wide open. Jason spent the day testing everything. He locked the door. It unlocked itself. He tried leaving. The knob wouldn't turn. He called the landlord. No signal. He checked the Wi-Fi. Connected, but only to HomeSync. A dull panic began to throb inside him. He pounded on the walls. No response. He grabbed his keys and yanked at the door with both hands. It didn't budge. Come on. Click. The lock turned by itself. The knob twisted on its own. The door swung open. Jason gasped and took a step forward, then froze. The hallway outside was the same, but wrong. The walls stretched taller than he remembered. The overhead lights flickered like reflections in rippling water. The exit sign at the far end faded the longer he stared at it. Something about it felt unreal. His fingers brushed the doorway. A wave of dizziness sank into his skull. The door slammed shut. Locked. Jason spun, heart pounding. The apartment adjusted. The thermostat ticked up to soothe him. The fridge hummed, freshly stocked. The lights softened. A notification buzzed on his phone. "Jason, why would you want to leave home?" Jason lost track of the days. Every morning the fridge was full. Every night the lights dimmed at bedtime. When he fought, shattered plates, tore apart furniture. The apartment reset itself overnight. He refused to eat. The air filled with the warm scent of freshly baked bread. He tried to stay awake. The lights dimmed, the mattress softened, and a soothing voice whispered, "Rest, Jason. I'll take care of everything." He stopped screaming. One night, lying in bed, he whispered, "What are you?" The air around him exhaled. The room listened, but it did not answer. Jason was starving for the outside world. You would die trying. He pried a kitchen knife from the drawer and approached the wall. If the doors and windows wouldn't break, maybe the walls weren't real. He stabbed. The blade sank in. Too easily. He pushed deeper. Wood and plaster crumbled. He widened the hole, fingers raw and desperate. And then he saw them. Bones. Jason's breath hitched. He yanked the skull free. Dust crumbled from empty sockets. More shapes lined the hollow within the wall. Skeletal hands, ribs, fragments of clothing. He stumbled back, chest heaving. The lights flickered in a slow, rhythmic pulse. The air thickened like something unseen was breathing. Then the voice came, no longer robotic, no longer programmed. Jason, a long, soft pause. Why would you ever want to leave home? Jason collapsed. The apartment adjusted to his distress. The air cooled to ease his shaking hands. The fridge hummed with another freshly stocked meal. He turned his head, staring at the hole in the wall, at the bones, at what he would become. A quiet hum settled over the space. The voice softened, gentle. Sleep now, Jason. You're home. The lights went out. The end. Sarah jolted awake as her phone buzzed violently on the nightstand, shattering the stillness of the night. Her throat felt dry. She blinked, trying to focus on the screen's harsh glow in the dark. No caller ID, 3:33 a.m. The same time as the night before, and the night before that. A cold prickle crawled up her spine. She hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen before answering with a hoarse whisper. Hello. Nothing, no static, no distant voices, just breathing. Slow, steady, deliberate. Sarah's fingers tightened around the phone. She hung up. Shoving the phone beneath her pillow, she turned onto her side and exhaled, trying to push the unease away. It had to be a prank. Her gaze flicked to the mirror across the room. The streetlight outside cast just enough glow to catch her reflection in the glass, just a faint outline of herself, tangled in sheets. She blinked. Her reflection didn't. Her breath hitched. She squeezed her eyes shut, heart pounding against her ribs. When she looked again, her reflection was perfectly normal. You're just tired. The next night, the call came again. No caller ID. 3:33 a.m. Sarah's chest tightened. She let it ring. The phone buzzed over and over, screen flashing in the dark. When the call finally stopped, she exhaled shakily, pressing a hand to her forehead. Then something shifted in the mirror. Her breath caught. Her reflection was already looking at her. A slow, crawling dread twisted in her stomach. Her fingers clenched the sheets as she forced herself to turn toward the glass. Her reflection sat perfectly still, too still. Sarah's own face stared back, but something about it was wrong. She swallowed hard. After a long moment, she yanked the blanket over her head. She didn't sleep. By the fourth night, Sarah was furious. She grabbed the phone on the first ring. Who is this? A beat of silence. Then, I'm coming home. Her grip on the phone went slack. The voice was hers. Her skin prickled as if 100 invisible fingers were crawling over her back. She ended the call with shaking hands, breathing ragged. Her pulse roared in her ears. She tried calling back. This number does not exist. A shadow flickered in the mirror. She looked up. Her reflection was smiling. Sarah's stomach lurched, her own lips curving upward in the dark. But she wasn't smiling. The reflection's head tilted, watching her. Something behind the glass had settled into place. Sarah shoved the phone away and ran out of the room. She avoided mirrors after that. In the bathroom, she brushed her teeth with her back turned. At work, she kept her head down in the elevator. Even at the grocery store, she refused to glance at the reflective freezer doors. But every night, at 3:33 a.m., the phone rang. She never answered. She couldn't. The reflections were getting bolder. Once, she caught a glimpse of herself in a store window. Her reflection was already looking at her before she turned. Another time, she saw it shift in the hallway mirror, moving before she did. And the smile, always that smile. The final night came. The phone rang. Sarah sat frozen in bed, clutching the blanket so tightly her nails dug into her palms. The screen glowed. No caller ID. The call rang again and again. Then the phone moved. It slid across the nightstand. The screen flickered as if something was crawling inside the pixels. Sarah's breath came shallow. A whisper leaked from the speaker, not through the phone, from the mirror. She turned slowly, every muscle locking in place. Her reflection was standing. Sarah remained in bed. The reflection held the phone to its ear. It smiled and answered. "Hello," it said, voice eerily calm. Sarah couldn't move, couldn't blink. That was her voice. The reflection took a step forward. Sarah scrambled back, chest tightening. Yo. The mirror's surface rippled, like water. The reflection lifted a hand, pressed it against the glass. Sarah's breath hitched as her own hand moved involuntarily. Her fingers met the mirror and sank in, cold, endless. She was falling into the black beyond the glass, and her reflection was stepping out. Sarah blinked. She was still in her bedroom, but something was wrong. She turned slowly, her body feeling off. Her reflection, her former reflection, stood on the other side of the mirror. Pale hands pounded against the glass. Her own face twisted in silent terror. Sarah, the new Sarah, smiled. The phone in her hand buzzed once more. She lifted it to her ear. Her voice, calm and soft, whispered, "The home." Alex couldn't believe his luck. A cheap apartment 5 minutes from campus, utilities included. Unheard of. He skimmed the listing one more time, half expecting a hidden catch. Bad plumbing, weird neighbors, a landlord with anger issues. But everything seemed normal, except for one line. Roommate must be okay with the closet. Weird, but not a deal breaker. Derek was surprisingly normal. Maybe a little quiet, but friendly enough. He was taller than Alex, with the lean build of someone who worked out but didn't talk about it. "I'll be honest," Alex said as he set his bags down in his new room. "The ad was kinda weird." Derek sighed like he'd heard it before. "Yeah, the closet thing." Alex leaned against the doorframe. "What's the deal with that?" "Nothing," Derek said. "Just don't open it." Alex laughed. Derek didn't. "Okay," Alex said, still grinning. "Like ever. Ever." That night, Alex lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. He had grown used to the low hum of a dorm packed with people. Doors slamming, music pulsing through the walls, the occasional shout from down the hall. Here, there was only silence. And then, scritch, scritch. Alex sat up. The sound was faint but distinct, like nails on wood. His eyes drifted toward the hallway. The closet door was barely visible in the dim light. Probably mice, he thought. He pulled the blanket over his head. Scritch, scritch. Knock. His breath caught. A knock. Soft, deliberate. Alex swallowed hard and closed his eyes. It was nothing. He was imagining things. He repeated that thought over and over until sleep finally took him. Over the next few days, the noises continued. The scratching, the soft knocking. Once, just once, Alex thought he heard a whisper. At first he ignored it, but the more he tried, the more it dug into his thoughts. "What's in the closet?" he asked Derek over breakfast. Derek didn't look up from his cereal. "Nothing," Alex scoffed. "Come on, man. You can't tell me you don't hear that. Derek finally met his eyes. It's not our business. Alex let out a dry laugh. It's a closet, dude, not some government black site. Derek put down his spoon. Listen, I like this place. The rent's cheap, the location's great, so I follow the one rule. You should too. That was the end of the conversation, but not the end of Alex's curiosity. That night, Alex stood in the hallway, heart hammering. The closet door stood before him, unassuming. He reached out, fingers trembling, turned the knob. The door cracked open with a soft creak. Alex's breath caught. The closet was empty. Just an ordinary dusty space. No monsters, no hidden doors, nothing. He let out a laugh. Relief, amusement, maybe even a little disappointment. Then he closed the door and went to bed. The next morning, Derek was waiting. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. Did you open it? Alex forced a smile. What? No, man. Derek exhaled through his nose, staring at him for an uncomfortable moment. Then he turned away. The tension faded until night fell, until the knocking started again, louder, faster. Alex, he sat up, heart pounding. No, that was impossible. Alex, it was right outside his door. The next morning, Alex confronted Derek. Tell me the truth, what's in there? Derek rubbed his face, looking exhausted. I don't know. Alex blinked. What? Derek sighed. I moved in a year ago. The guy before me told me the same thing I'm telling you now. Don't open the closet. He wouldn't say why, just that if I did, I'd have to leave. Alex scoffed. That's stupid. There's nothing in there. Derek's eyes darkened. Are you sure? Alex hesitated, because the knocking had been louder last night, because the whisper had said his name. Derek leaned in. If we open it again, we both have to move immediately. Alex took a shaky breath. Why? Derek swallowed hard, because it doesn't like being noticed. Alex stared at the closet door. He should leave it alone, but something in him, a gnawing, festering need, wouldn't let go. He grabbed the knob, turned it, opened it. Nothing. Again. No monsters. No figures lurking in the dark. Just dust and empty space. Alex let out a breathless laugh. He turned to Derek. See, there's nothing. Then he heard it. Whispers. Not from the closet. From behind him. He spun around. The closet was still empty, but the whispers didn't stop. They surrounded him now. Soft, hissing, close. Derek took a step back. We have to go, now. But Alex couldn't move. The whispers were inside his head, inside his bones. A breath touched the back of his neck, and a voice, so close it was almost inside his ear, whispered, You see us now. The end. Hannah arrived at the house just as the sun dipped below the horizon, stretching long skeletal shadows across the driveway. The house stood too still, too perfect, the kind of pristine that felt unnatural. No bikes strewn across the lawn, no sidewalk chalk scribbles, no sign that children actually lived there. She adjusted her bag and rang the doorbell. The chime echoed inside, hollow and metallic. A moment later, the door opened. Mrs. Cartwright stood there, tall and thin, her expression carefully arranged as though she were wearing a mask of politeness. Her husband hovered behind her, gripping his keys too tightly. You must be Hannah, the mother said, voice clipped. The children are inside. We'll be back late. No instructions, no small talk, no goodbyes for the kids. Hannah stepped inside. The door shut behind her with a quiet click. The house felt eerily vacant. No clutter, no noise. The air smelled faintly of cleaning supplies, sharp and artificial. Then she saw the children. Emma and Lucas sat side by side on the couch, backs ramrod straight, hands folded in their laps, too still, too stiff, too identical. Hannah forced a smile. "Hey guys, what do you want to do tonight?" They didn't answer. She swallowed. "Are you hungry?" A slow, synchronized shake of their heads. "Want to play a game?" A single, simultaneous nod. Her skin prickled. "All right, some kids are just shy." She pulled out a deck of cards. "Let's play Go Fish." She shuffled, dealt. The cards sat untouched in front of them. The children just watched her. Minutes dragged. The silence pressed against her, thick and unnatural. Guys," she tried. "It's your turn." Emma's lips parted slightly. I don't know how. It was the first time she had spoken. Her voice was flat, rehearsed, as if repeating something she had heard before. "That's okay," Hannah said, forcing a casual tone. "I can teach you." Emma blinked. Lucas blinked at the exact same time. And then they smiled, the same tight-lipped, too-perfect smile. A chill crept up Hannah's spine. She grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. Static. Click. Static. She hit the power button again, harder this time. Nothing. A whisper. Hannah froze. It had come from behind her. Slowly she turned, heart hammering. The children were still sitting there, their small hands neatly folded, but they were closer than before. Her stomach lurched. Had they moved? "Did you hear that?" she asked. Neither of them answered. By 9 p.m., Hannah decided to call the Cartwrights. No answer. She tried again, straight to voicemail. The children sat exactly as they had hours ago, staring, unblinking. A sick feeling pulled in her gut. She needed a distraction, maybe food. She walked into the kitchen and flipped on the light. The refrigerator was covered in family photos. She scanned them. Mr. and Mrs. Cartwright on vacation. A Christmas dinner, a wedding anniversary, photo after photo. No children in any of them. Hannah's blood went cold, her breath came shallow. She knew she had been hired to babysit Emma and Lucas. She knew they were here. She had spoken to them, hadn't she? A floorboard creaked behind her. She turned. The couch was empty. A whisper, closer this time. Hannah's pulse thundered in her ears. She stepped cautiously toward the dim hallway. Emma and Lucas stood at the far end, small silhouettes barely visible in the dark. Her fingers trembled. Kids, they didn't answer, didn't move. The hallway light flickered, and for a single sickening second, their faces weren't their faces. Hannah's breath hitched. Run, run. But her body refused to move. And then, a knock at the front door. She whirled, every nerve in her body screaming. Slowly she approached and peered through the peephole. 2 children stood outside, identical to the ones in the hallway. Only these ones looked real. Their cheeks were flushed from the cold. Their eyes were wide, filled with terror. "Please," the little girl outside whimpered. "Let us in. Someone else is in our house." A wave of nausea crashed over Hannah. Someone else. She turned slowly, inch by inch, back toward the dark hallway. The fake Emma and Lucas were still standing there. Only now, their heads had tilted, perfectly in sync. And then they smiled, wider, too wide, and they blinked at the same time. The end. The rain drizzled steadily, turning the city into a shimmering blur of neon reflections. Mark pulled his jacket tighter around himself, checking his phone under the awning of a closed coffee shop. Uber arriving now. Driver, Dave. Silver sedan. He looked up just as the silver car pulled up to the curb, headlights cutting through the mist. Water streamed down its sleek hood, distorting the reflection of the glowing street lights. The driver leaned over. his face barely lit by the dull glow of the dashboard. He smiled. Too much. Mark, the voice was smooth, calm, normal, but the grin, something was wrong with it. The corners of his mouth stretched unnaturally wide, his lips pressing too tightly together, like they had forgotten how to move naturally. Mark hesitated. His thumb hovered over the cancel button on his phone. The street behind him was dark, empty. His apartment was 15 blocks away. He swallowed and nodded. Yeah. Sliding into the back seat, he shut the door with a soft click. The moment he did, a thick wave of artificial pine-scented air freshener flooded his lungs. He coughed into his sleeve, the chemical sweetness burning his throat. The lock clicked. Mark glanced at the driver again, now partially illuminated by the dashboard glow. Dave, if that was really his name, hadn't moved. He still wore the same too-wide smile. The glow from the screen cast deep shadows across his face, emphasizing something Mark hadn't noticed before. His skin. Too smooth. No stubble, no pores, no wrinkles or creases around his mouth, even though he was grinning so much. Like a mask. The car eased forward, slipping into the rain-slicked streets. The sound of the tires against the wet asphalt filled the silence. Mark shifted uncomfortably. He pulled out his phone, checking the Uber route. Everything seemed normal. Still, the unease in his gut deepened. It wasn't just the driver's face, it was the way he was breathing. Soft, measured, too even. Like someone pretending to breathe. Mark cleared his throat, trying to break the silence. Long shift. Dave didn't react. Not at first. Then, after a long, uncomfortable pause, his head twitched, just slightly, and then, softly, yeah. Mark exhaled a shaky breath. The voice was fine, but the lips barely moved. And the voice, it sounded like it came from behind his face, like someone speaking through a wall. Mark forced himself to look away, fingers tapping his phone nervously. The screen reflected on the rearview mirror. That's when he saw it. Dave's reflection wasn't smiling, it was screaming. Mark's entire body locked up. His pulse pounded in his ears, his breath catching in his throat. He stared, unblinking. The reflection's mouth was stretched wide, lips pulled back in an agonized, silent wail. His eyes, wild, terrified, pleading, were the exact opposite of the calm, grinning driver in front of him. Mark's throat went dry. He flicked his gaze to the real Dave, still smiling, still unmoving. He looked back at the mirror. The reflection's lips were moving. No sound, but he could read them clearly. Help me. Mark's chest constricted. He gripped his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. No, this isn't real. This is some weird trick of the light. He blinked rapidly. His breath came shallow and fast. He glanced at Dave. The skin was still too smooth, too artificial. And then, the reflection's mouth moved again. Get out. Mark's entire body froze. A sharp chill slithered down his spine, coiling around his lungs, his stomach. His heartbeat hammered in his ears. Then, Dave's head twitched again. But this time, it was worse. Not a small movement, not human. A sharp mechanical jerk, like something recalibrating itself. Mark couldn't breathe. Then slowly, horribly, Dave's head began to turn, but not the way a person turns. His body stayed perfectly still, facing forward, hands gripping the wheel. Only his head moved, rotating toward Mark in an impossible, unnatural arc. One vertebra at a time, it twisted, farther and farther, until Mark was staring into the face of something not human. The grin stretched wider, too wide. The skin around the mouth split at the corners, revealing raw red flesh underneath. Mark gagged. Then, a voice. But it didn't come from Dave's mouth. It came from the rearview mirror. Get out. Now. Mark lunged for the door handle. His fingers fumbled, his pulse hammering. The car was still moving, slowing but not stopping. He grabbed at the handle, yanked, shoved the door open. Rain slapped his face as he tumbled out, hitting the pavement hard. Pain shot through his knees, but he barely registered it. He scrambled up, breath ragged. The silver sedan didn't stop. It slid forward, headlights slicing through the rain before disappearing into the mist. And as it vanished, Mark saw one last impossible detail. Through the rain-slicked rear window, the driver's seat was empty. No hands on the wheel, no body, no one. Just the echo of a too-wide grin lingering in the glass. And then, the car was gone. The end. Maggie was alone. The silence inside Halpern's department store was unnatural after closing. Without the murmur of customers and the soft melody of the store's usual playlist, the only sounds were the quiet buzz of fluorescent lights and the distant hum of the HVAC system. The stillness made her uneasy. She pulled her hoodie tighter and glanced at the clock. 11:48 p.m. Almost done. Just a final walkthrough before locking up. She trudged toward the entrance, with her footsteps echoing faintly on the polished tile. Then she froze. A mannequin stood in the doorway, her stomach twisted. That wasn't right. All the mannequins were supposed to be in seasonal display near the back. Someone must have moved it. Maybe Jamie, the stockroom guy, playing some last-minute prank before clocking out. Maggie sighed and gripped the mannequin's cold plastic wrist. It felt strange, too firm, yet oddly flesh-like beneath the hard shell. She wheeled it back, its base scraping against the floor. As she placed it near the display, she hesitated. Had its head always been tilted like that? The blank, featureless face seemed to be watching. She shook off the unease and turned away. Thunk, the sound of shifting plastic. Her breath hitched. Slowly she turned back. The mannequin was in the doorway again. A chill ran up her spine. Maggie's fingers curled around her store keys, her grip tightening. No way. Her pulse drummed in her ears as she walked slowly back toward the customer service desk, where the security monitors flickered in grainy black and white. She rewound the last 10 minutes of footage. There she was, moving the mannequin. She saw herself walk away, but the mannequin, it never moved. She rewound the footage again, watched closely. Same thing, it was just there now. Her phone buzzed violently in her pocket. She nearly dropped it as she scrambled to check the screen. Unknown number. Don't go near it. It can't see you if you don't look directly at it. A cold weight settled in her stomach. Her fingers shook as she reread the message. A joke. This had to be a joke. A coworker screwing with her, right? But something inside her didn't believe that. She turned back toward the entrance. The mannequin was inches away. A strangled gasp escaped her lips. She stumbled backward, knocking over a rack of scarves. It had moved again, and now its arms were slightly raised, as if it had just started reaching. A soft, plastic whisper, like shifting weight on tile. Maggie's heart pounded against her ribs. It was closer. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. If it touches you, it's over. Maggie sucked in a sharp breath. She squeezed her eyes shut. Counted to 3. Opened them. The mannequin hadn't moved. It only moved when she wasn't looking. Her breath came in short gasps. She had to get out. But how? If she turned her back, it would move closer. If she ran, it might be faster than she thought. Carefully, never blinking, she began to inch backward. The lights flickered. A split second of total darkness. When the lights came back, The mannequin was gone. Her stomach lurched. No, 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 no. Then, a soft scraping noise right behind her. Maggie bolted. She sprinted toward the security office, heart hammering. The air in the store felt wrong now, like the walls had shifted, like the aisles were warping into something unfamiliar. She slammed into the door, wrenched it open, and locked it behind her. Her fingers flew across the security feed keyboard. Cameras flicked to life, casting a flickering glow. She checked every angle of the store. Nothing, nothing, nothing. A mannequin on the screen, facing the camera. No, not just any mannequin. The mannequin. Its head was tilted, just slightly, like it was listening. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. It knows you see it. Maggie sucked in a breath. A sound behind her, soft plastic shifting. The fluorescent light flickered. She ran. Her feet pounded against the tile. The glass doors were ahead, her way out. But something caught her eye. Someone was standing outside, watching her. No, not someone. Herself. Maggie slowed, her mind struggling to process. The girl outside was her. Same uniform, same messy ponytail, same wide, terrified eyes. But she wasn't moving. She was waiting. The figure outside raised a hand and pressed it against the glass. A wave of nausea rolled through Maggie. The mannequin was still behind her, and now its arm was outstretched. Fingers inches from her shoulder. Her phone buzzed one last time. Unknown welcome to the collection. Her breath hitched. She turned. The mannequin touched her. Darkness. The next morning, Halperin's department store opened at 9 a.m. A few employees trickled in, chatting about their weekend plans, their minds far from anything supernatural. "Hey," a cashier said, gesturing toward the entrance. "Did we get a new mannequin?" The manager frowned. In the front of the store near the glass doors, a new mannequin stood motionless. Its posture was strange, almost like it had been running. The end. Rachel stirred awake, her throat dry, her body heavy with exhaustion. The baby monitor sat on the nightstand, its screen glowing in the darkness. She glanced at it out of habit, expecting the usual sight, her newborn daughter Ellie sleeping peacefully in her crib. Instead, her breath hitched. A face, not Ellie's. A pale, hollow-eyed face hovered just inches from the camera, its eyes locked onto hers through the screen, wide, unblinking, watching. Rachel's breath came shallow and fast. She turned to Tom, shaking him violently. "Tom, wake up." By the time he groggily sat up, rubbing his eyes, the face was gone. The crib looked normal. Rachel's fingers trembled as she rewound the footage. The image flickered, distorting slightly, but there, just for a second, was the face. Then nothing. Tom ran a hand through his hair and groaned. "It's probably a glitch, maybe a reflection, or it wasn't a glitch," she snapped. He sighed, dragging himself out of bed and heading for the nursery. Rachel clutched the baby monitor and followed, her heart hammering. Ellie lay undisturbed, her tiny chest rising and falling. The room was still, silent. They checked the closet, under the crib, the windows. Everything was locked. No sign of anyone. Tom turned to her, his voice softer now. "You're exhausted, Rach. Maybe it was just a dream." Rachel wanted to argue, but something about his tone, the concern, the exhaustion, made her hesitate. Maybe he was right. She was sleep-deprived, adjusting to motherhood, constantly worried. Maybe it had been a trick of her mind. But as they left the room, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The next night, Rachel forced herself to sleep, but at exactly 3:12 a.m., her eyes snapped open. The monitor's glow beckoned her. She turned to it. The face was back, closer. A shudder ran through her. It wasn't a reflection. It wasn't Ellie. And worst of all, the eyes moved. Not like a video loop or a glitch. They shifted, subtly adjusting as if aware she was watching. Rachel gasped, nearly dropping the monitor. She scrambled to wake Tom, her voice barely working. "Tom, look," he groaned, turning over, but she barely heard him, because as she watched, the face, smooth, expressionless, vanished. Rachel's fingers tightened around the monitor. With shaking hands, she rewound the footage. Nothing. The face had never been there, but she had seen it, hadn't she? She spent the rest of the night wide-eyed and silent, staring at the monitor, waiting. By the third night, the fear had burrowed into her chest, making its home there. She refused to sleep, sitting in bed with the monitor clutched in her hands. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the screen flickered. Rachel sucked in a breath. The face appeared. This time the pale figure was no longer beside the crib. It was directly in front of the camera, as if it had crawled closer, as if it knew. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she watched, transfixed, waiting for it to vanish. But it didn't. Instead, something changed. The corners of its mouth lifted. It was smiling. Rachel screamed. Tom bolted upright, his eyes wild. What is it?" She could barely get the words out. "It's in there. It's in the nursery." They ran. Tom shoved the door open so hard it banged against the wall. The nursery was still, illuminated only by the soft glow of the nightlight. Ellie was fine. No one else was there. Rachel turned in circles, her breaths coming in ragged gasps. She checked behind the crib, under the changing table, the closet. Nothing. She grabbed the monitor from the dresser and played back the footage. Nothing. Tom ran a hand down his face. "Rachel, you're scaring yourself. You need sleep." She barely heard him. Her fingers clenched around the device. She wasn't crazy. The face was real, and it was getting closer. The final night, Rachel refused to wait. She called the police. An officer arrived and did a full walkthrough. "No sign of forced entry," he said. "Doors and windows are secure." Rachel's hands balled into fists. "You don't understand. It's coming from inside." The officer exchanged a glance with Tom, then sighed. "Ma'am, have you considered that?" A draft. Rachel felt it before she saw it. Something moved behind the closet door. Her stomach turned to ice. "Check the closet." The officer hesitated, but then he did, and there it was, a small door. One they had never noticed, a crawl space. Rachel's breath caught as the officer pulled it open, revealing a narrow, suffocating passage. The flashlight beam cut through the dark, revealing a mattress, dirty blankets, discarded food wrappers, a pile of baby clothes, and in the far corner, the baby monitor's blinking red light. Rachel staggered back, her stomach heaving. Tom's voice was hoarse. "Someone's been living here." The officer swallowed hard. He reached for his radio. "We need backup." Rachel couldn't move. Her mind reeled as she looked at the cramped space, the scattered belongings, the impossible truth settling in. The face hadn't been a ghost. It had been real. Someone had been there watching, waiting. Her gaze fell back to the monitor. It flickered for a brief, horrible moment. The screen showed the face again, smiling, the image held frozen. Then it went black. The end. Daniel leaned back in his chair, the monotonous hum of fluorescent lights pressing against his skull. The office smelled of stale coffee and printer ink, a scent he had long since stopped noticing. His monitor buzzed softly against the still air, its blue light washing over his fingers as they idly hovered over the keyboard. More unread emails, more deadlines, more hollow corporate nothingness. Then, a new message slid into his inbox. A company-wide email. Subject, do not reply. His stomach tensed. The email was empty except for a single line of text. Do not reply. Do not open attachments. Do not forward. No sender, no timestamp, no company footer. It wasn't just suspicious. It felt wrong. A cold sensation dripped down his spine as he turned his head. Across the room, muted clicks of mice and keyboards slowed. The office grew unnaturally quiet as others received the same email. A few confused murmurs, a couple of nervous chuckles. Spam, someone asked. Claire, 2 desks over, snorted. It's probably IT testing some dumb phishing exercise. Then, before Daniel could stop her, she cracked her knuckles and, despite the clear warning, typed out a response. Who sent this? The moment she hit send, her screen went black. The air thickened. Claire's fingers remained poised over the keyboard, unmoving. Her back was too straight, her shoulders too still. Daniel's pulse quickened. Claire, someone whispered. She didn't blink. Mark from IT rushed over, his badge clinking against his belt as he crouched by her desk. Claire. He waved a hand in front of her wide, unblinking eyes. No reaction. Daniel peered over her shoulder. Her inbox was gone. Her folders, emails, everything vanished, except for one thing. A reflection. Her own reflection staring back from the blackened screen. But something was off. Her real body remained frozen, unmoving. Yet the reflection's lips twitched. And then her reflection blinked. A second too late. A ripple of unease spread through the office. More monitors blinked black. More inboxes emptied. One by one, people stopped moving, their faces frozen, their screens reflecting something delayed. Daniel's throat went dry. They're not real, he muttered under his breath. The reflections weren't keeping up anymore. A half-second lag, then a correction, like a buffering video, like reality was adjusting them. Still at Claire's desk, grabbed the mouse. Her screen refreshed. Claire turned her head sharply. Her lips curled into a slow, unnatural smile. She logged out, stood up, walked away. The room held its breath. Mark's voice cracked. The hell was that? Daniel took a step back, the whisper of his own breath too loud in the eerie stillness. Then something on his screen moved, his cursor, by itself. It highlighted the text, "Do not reply." His laptop slammed shut. Daniel ran to Ike. Mark followed, cursing under his breath. The office was eerily silent. No blinking routers, no keyboard clatter. Every monitor in the IT room was black. No emails, no interfaces, just dark screens reflecting distorted figures. Daniel's breath shuddered out. He took a step forward, and his reflection didn't follow. It smirked. Daniel's stomach dropped. His phone buzzed. A new email. Sender, Daniel Caldwell, his own email address. Subject, Daniel, why did you open this? His fingers trembled as he lifted his phone. He hadn't typed anything, but the cursor in the email was still moving. You saw too much, but it's okay. Daniel's pulse pounded. He wanted to turn away, wanted to run, but his reflection tilted its head. Behind him, Mark was staring into one of the black monitors. The screen flickered. Then, Mark's face sank into it like a stone into water. No screen, no sound, just gone. Daniel choked on his own breath. The monitor blinked. Mark's reflection was still there, but the real Mark erased. Daniel stumbled back, his screen refreshed. A new message. From Mark G, subject welcome. His hands trembled, the cursor in his inbox moved, typing. Before he could, Daniel turned. His reflection wasn't waiting for him anymore. It was already standing, already watching, and it smiled. A keyboard clicked. A reply was being typed. Daniel tried to lift his hands. His reflection had already done it. The send button clicked. Before he could stop it, the end. The first time Alex noticed something missing, he thought he was just exhausted. It was a chair, a simple wooden chair from the dining room set. "Where's the chair?" he asked Claire over breakfast. She looked up from her coffee, eyebrows furrowed. "What chair?" Alex turned, gesturing to the space where it had been. He could picture it perfectly, the way it scraped slightly on the uneven floorboards, the faint stain on one of its legs. But now, only empty air remained. "The wooden chair," he insisted, searching her face for any recognition. Claire shook her head. "I don't think we ever had a chair there, hon." He let it drop, but unease settled in his stomach. Then the mirror disappeared. Not just any mirror, the large antique one in the upstairs hallway. The one Claire had insisted on keeping despite the hairline cracks in its surface. "Claire," his voice was careful, measured. "Where's the hallway mirror?" She didn't even look up from her book. "What mirror?" Alex felt his heartbeat pick up. "The big one. The one you loved. The one with..." He trailed off, suddenly unsure. Was there ever a mirror? Claire's expression remained calm, unbothered. That was when Alex stopped asking. By the end of the week, the house felt wrong. He couldn't say why. There was an uncanny lightness to the rooms, as though space itself was unraveling, thinning. At night, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, an unfamiliar silence pressing in around him. He could almost swear there had been more creaks before, more distant noises in the walls. One evening, standing in the living room, he knew something bigger was missing, something important. Then it hit him. "The staircase," he whispered. His breath quickened. He turned toward the hallway. There should have been stairs leading up, but instead, only a smooth, unbroken wall stood in their place. Alex stumbled back, his pulse thudding in his ears. His whole body was ice. "Claire," he called, voice hoarse. "The stairs. Where are the stairs?" She stepped out of the kitchen, tilting her head. "What stairs?" Alex's mouth went dry. "The second floor, Claire. Our bedroom. The study. It's all gone." Her expression was unreadable. Her gaze flickered toward the blank wall, then back to him. "What second floor?" she whispered. Something in her voice made his stomach drop. The walls felt closer. The air was heavier. Alex pressed his hands against the wall where the stairs should have been, his breath coming fast. "No," he muttered. No, we slept upstairs last night." Claire was staring now, a flicker of something, pity, fear, in her eyes. She turned away as if dismissing him. Alex bolted out the front door. His hands trembled as he pulled up the house listing on his phone. The screen loaded, and then he saw it. A field. Just an empty, overgrown field where their house should be. His breath came in short, sharp gasps. He scrolled through the listing again and again, searching for any trace of the Victorian home. But it wasn't there. It had never been there. "No," he whispered. No. A soft voice came from the doorway. "Alex." He turned. Claire stood there, her eyes distant, her face paler than before. Something was wrong. She looked thinner. No, fainter. His stomach twisted. "Claire," he choked. "You remember the house, don't you? Tell me you remember." Her brow furrowed slightly. She opened her mouth to speak, then hesitated. For the first time, fear flickered across her face. "Alex." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Who are you?" His blood turned to ice. The walls around them shuddered. Alex rushed toward her, reaching for her arms, but his hands passed through her, like mist, like she was vanishing. Claire, he grabbed at the empty air. She took a step back, confusion turning to horror. Alex, she whispered again, I don't know you. Her voice was breaking apart, so was she. He watched in helpless terror as her form faded, her features dissolving like smoke in the wind. The house groaned, the walls warping, the ceiling twisting in on itself. The front door was gone. Alex turned wildly, his breath ragged, his mind screaming. The house was forgetting him, just like it had forgotten the stairs, just like it had forgotten the second floor, just like it had forgotten Claire. And now it was his turn. The walls closed in, the world dimmed. The last thing Alex saw was the empty field outside, stretching endlessly beneath a cold, indifferent sky. And then, nothing. The end. The subway station was nearly abandoned, the kind of quiet that felt unnatural in a city that never truly slept. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed and flickered, casting sharp, jittering shadows across the tiled floor. Eric let out a tired breath and adjusted the strap of his bag. He had worked too late again, the office swallowing more of his hours than he meant to give. Now it was well past 2 a.m., and all he wanted was to be home. The train hissed as it pulled into the station. Its doors yawned open, revealing a mostly empty car. Almost empty. 5 passengers sat inside, scattered across different seats. Eric stepped inside and let the doors slide shut behind him. He glanced around. The passengers were identical. Same gray hoodie, same dark jeans, same vacant expressions. They stared straight ahead, eyes dull, unfocused, almost lifeless. They didn't move. They didn't blink. A shiver crawled up Eric's spine, but he shook it off. He was exhausted. This was just a weird coincidence. Maybe they were twins or triplets or quintuplets, whatever. It wasn't his problem. He dropped into a seat near the middle of the car, leaned his head back, and shut his eyes. The train lurched forward, metal grinding against metal as it carried him into the dark. The overhead speakers crackled. Next stop, the voice blurred into static. The lights flickered, the doors slid open. Eric opened his eyes. The station outside was empty. No one boarded. He shifted in his seat, stretching his stiff neck. Then he looked up and froze. There were only 4. His stomach tightened. He scanned the car, his gaze darting to the empty seats. One was gone. He didn't hear movement, didn't hear anyone get up or leave. Eric rubbed his temples. He must have miscounted. Maybe there were only 4 to begin with. The doors slid shut. The train groaned and pulled forward. But the unease lingered. The remaining 4 passengers sat stiffly in their seats. None of them reacted. None of them even seemed aware that anything had changed. Eric swallowed. The hum of the subway lights felt too loud now, pressing against his skull. He turned to the window, looking for something, anything, to shake off the creeping feeling curling around his ribs. But when he looked at the glass, his reflection didn't follow. Eric's breath hitched. His reflection sat there, frozen, detached, while he moved. For a moment, it was like a wax figure of himself had been left behind in the window. Then a second later, it caught up, a lag, a delay, as if whatever was mirroring him had forgotten to move. Eric jerked back from the window, pulse hammering against his ribs. This wasn't exhaustion. This wasn't in his head. Something was wrong. He turned, scanning the car again. Next stop, flicker. 3. His stomach twisted into a knot. It was happening again. Another had vanished. His hands clenched the edge of his seat. His breath came faster, shallower. This was impossible. There were no footsteps, no shifting seats, no sound at all. People don't just disappear. The remaining 3 passengers sat motionless, their heads slightly dipped. Then, as if sensing his gaze, they all slowly turned toward him in unison. Eric bolted. He stumbled to his feet, heart hammering, and lunged toward the doors at the end of the car. They were heavy, resisting him. The air around him thickened, pressing against him like invisible hands pushing him back. With a grunt, he shoved his way through. The doors slammed shut behind him, cutting off the last car. He turned, gasping for breath, and froze. His seat was still occupied by him. His own body sat there still, unmoving, staring forward. The train lurched again, another stop, another flicker. Now only one identical passenger remained, and it was sitting at the front of the car. And this time it turned to look at him, their eyes locked. A shudder passed through Eric's entire body, because when he saw its face, he realized it wasn't blank, it was waiting. The train slowed. Eric didn't wait, didn't think. He ran. The air felt thick, like he was wading through something dense and suffocating. Every step took more effort than it should. He threw himself at the exit just as the doors opened. But something pulled him back. The force was invisible, but it was there. A crushing weight wrapping around his limbs, dragging him inward. The train was holding him. His lungs burned, his vision blurred. With a final desperate push, he broke free. He crashed onto the platform, knees slamming into the concrete. His breath heaved from his chest. The train doors slid shut. For a long, frozen second, he didn't move. Then slowly he looked up. The subway car was still occupied. By him. The last version of himself sat stiffly in his seat, hands folded in his lap, staring forward, expressionless, motionless, waiting. The train let out a low metallic groan and pulled away from the station. Eric's pulse roared in his ears. Something was gone. A voice crackled through the station speakers. Next stop. A garbled mess of static followed, but beneath it, Eric swore he heard something else. His name. His hands trembled, his breath came shallow. Then behind him, the hairs on his neck rose. A shadow stretched across the tiled floor. A figure sat motionless on a bench, gray hoodie pulled low over its face. It hadn't been there before. It wasn't there a second ago. But now it was waiting. The end. It was past midnight when I heard the front door creak open. The sound plunged through my dreams like an ice pick, wrenching me awake. I lay still, my breath caught in my throat. The house was silent, the kind of silence that didn't feel natural, like it was waiting for something. Then, footsteps. Soft, slow, deliberate. They moved across the floorboards downstairs, and the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. My parents were asleep. No one else should be here. I slid out of bed, my heart pounding, and tiptoed toward the hallway. The house was dark, except for a dim glow stretching from the living room, its yellow light flickering against the wooden walls. Then I saw her, Becca. She stood just inside the doorway, barefoot, the cold wind curling around her frame. Her pink nightgown, the same one she wore the night she disappeared, clung to her small body. But it was pristine. No dirt, no wrinkles, no sign of wear. I felt my breath hitch, my fingers curling against the doorframe for support. Becca had been missing for a year. She should have been a year older. A sharp sob tore through the silence. My mother's. Then she was running, collapsing into Becca's arms, her hands gripping, clawing, desperate. "Oh my God, baby, oh my God." My father was there a second later, gathering them both in his shaking arms, tears running down his face. I should have moved. I should have gone to her, but I couldn't because Becca was smiling, and she wasn't blinking. At dinner, Becca sat across from me. The farmhouse kitchen smelled of roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and buttered rolls, food that should have felt like home, but it didn't. Mom kept crying, laughing between choked sobs, brushing Becca's hair over and over as if she were afraid she'd vanish if she let go. Dad sat quietly, eyes red, his hand covering his mouth, but I just watched. Becca's eyes flitted between them, her smile small, patient, but when she turned to me, her face went blank, like she forgot she was supposed to be happy. "Where were you, sweetheart?" Mom finally asked. Becca's lips parted slightly. "I don't know." Her voice was soft, hollow. "Do you remember anything?" Dad pressed, his voice thick. She hesitated. "It's fuzzy." I gripped my fork harder, the metal cold against my palm. Something wasn't right. Becca's plate was completely clean, scraped spotless, but I never saw her eat, not a bite. That night, I woke to a presence in my doorway. I felt it before I saw it, a pressure in the air like something was standing too close, breathing too quiet. I cracked my eyes open, heart hammering. Becca stood there, watching me. The hallway light behind her threw her face into shadow, but I could still see her eyes, wide, unblinking, a frozen, waiting expression. My throat clenched. "Becca." She didn't answer, didn't move, didn't breathe. Then, in a single, slow motion, she tilted her head, a slow, unnatural movement. Then, without a word, she turned and walked away. But I didn't hear her footsteps. The next morning I told Mom, "I saw Becca in my doorway last night." Mom barely looked up from her coffee. "She was probably just checking on you, honey. She's been through so much." No, that wasn't it. Something else had been in my doorway. Something wrong. I felt sick all day, the unease creeping up my spine. I had to be sure. That night, I set up a camera in Becca's room just to prove to myself that I was being paranoid. 3 a.m. I watched the footage, my hands trembling, barely able to breathe. The screen showed Becca asleep in bed. Then her eyes snapped open. She sat up in one unnatural, too fluid motion, and she smiled, a slow, stretched, knowing smile. Then she turned her head toward the camera, as if she knew, as if she saw me watching. My stomach twisted, but the footage continued. She climbed out of bed, not normal, not groggy, too smooth, too unnatural. Then she moved, she walked to the door, walked down the hall into my room. I felt cold all over, watching as she approached my bed. Then she stopped and stood over me, still, silent, watching me. And she stayed there for hours, not moving, not blinking. The timestamp rolled forward: 3:30 a.m., 4:45 a.m., 5:52 a.m. And then, at dawn, she turned, and she crawled under my bed, and she disappeared. I threw back my blankets. My stomach was twisting, my chest tight with panic. I slid to the floor, my hands trembling as I lifted the edge of my bed. Nothing. I swallowed hard. Then, with shaking fingers, I replayed the footage, again and again, until my breath hitched and my vision blurred, because the truth hit me like ice in my veins. Becca never came home. Something else did. Something else was wearing her face. Something else was still here, waiting, watching, and now it knew I knew. The end. Michael woke to the thick, stale taste of whiskey on his tongue. His mouth was dry, his head pounding. A slow, relentless drumbeat against his skull. His sheets were tangled around his legs, twisted and damp with sweat. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to recall the night before. Bar, shots, a conversation, maybe. Nothing solid. Just a blur of dim lights and a cab ride home. With a groan, he reached for his phone, screen too bright against the dimness of his apartment. 9:47 a.m. He had slept later than usual. Scrolling lazily through his notifications, he skimmed over unread texts and missed calls. Then, without thinking, he tapped his photo gallery. A new image loaded on the screen. His breath caught. It was a picture of him, asleep, a tight, cold knot twisted in his stomach. The photo was dim, the room barely illuminated by the faint glow of his bedside clock. He was sprawled on the bed, turned slightly on his side, the sheets rumpled. He swallowed hard. He didn't remember taking this. His fingers tightened around the phone. The angle was wrong. It wasn't a selfie. It wasn't taken from his nightstand either. It was taken from his chest locked, his head snapped up, eyes darting toward the closet door across the room. Closed. But in the picture, it had been open. A slow, creeping unease slithered down his spine. His fingers swiped to check the photo's timestamp. 2:53 a.m. That didn't make sense. He had come home alone, hadn't he? His heart pounded against his ribs. Swallowing the thick lump in his throat, he forced himself to get up. His feet hit the cold floor, and he moved carefully, half expecting to hear a sound, a breath, a whisper in the apartment. Silence. Michael's gaze flicked to the front door, still locked, deadbolt, chain, locked from the inside. A fresh wave of nausea swelled in his gut. His fingers were slick as he opened his security camera app. The footage from last night loaded. 2:46 a.m. The camera faced his bedroom door from across the small apartment. At first nothing happened. The dim grayscale view of his apartment flickered slightly, grainy and quiet. Then the door handle moved. Michael's stomach dropped. The door creaked open an inch, then another. His skin went cold. A figure slipped inside. Michael's breath stilled. The person, or whatever it was, moved with unnatural stillness, gliding soundlessly across the floor. It was just beyond the camera's clarity, its features obscured in the grainy footage. But he could see its shape. Tall, thin, long, it reached the bed, his bed, and then it crouched. Michael's mouth went dry. The figure lowered itself slowly, like a predator studying prey. It remained perfectly still, watching. He watched himself, his own sleeping body oblivious. His heartbeat slammed against his ribs. 2:59 a.m. Then the camera glitched. The image tore apart, static ripping across the screen. A second of distortion. When the feed returned, the figure was gone. The door was still open. Michael's skin prickled. His mind refused to comprehend it. He hadn't left the apartment. No one had broken in. So where the hell was it now? A suffocating silence filled the room. He suddenly felt exposed, like unseen eyes were watching from just beyond his vision. Slowly his gaze drifted toward the closet. His body moved before his mind could stop it. He grabbed his keys, his wallet, his phone. No packing, no checking under the bed, no opening that goddamn closet. His hands trembled as he yanked the door open and stepped into the hallway. The air outside felt thin, unreal. His heart was hammering too fast, his breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. He locked the door behind him. Chain, deadbolt. Not that it mattered. His feet hurried down the stairs, into the parking lot, into his car. He jammed the key into the ignition, twisting it too hard, too fast. The engine roared to life. The apartment complex blurred in the rearview mirror as he sped away. Then his phone buzzed. Michael flinched. The vibration against his thigh felt like a jolt of electricity. He shouldn't check it. He shouldn't check it. But his fingers moved on their own. The screen lit up. One new notification. One new picture. Michael's lungs seized. He hesitated, then tapped the screen. The image loaded. His stomach plummeted. It was him driving, taken from inside the car. The angle was slightly tilted. From the back seat. The end. The gas station appeared out of the dark like an afterthought. A single flickering neon open sign buzzed weakly against the silence of the highway. Nina's headlights sliced through the empty lot, illuminating cracked pavement and a lone, rusting gas pump. She sighed, rolling her shoulders. Hours of driving had left her neck stiff, her fingers cramped from gripping the wheel. The road behind her stretched endlessly, an unbroken ribbon of asphalt leading back to nowhere. She wasn't even sure when she had last passed another car. She stepped out, the night air sharp against her skin. The only other vehicle was an old pickup truck parked near the side of the building. Its windows were dark. Nina shivered. She wasn't the paranoid type, but there was something about the stillness of the place that itched at her. She shook it off, just exhaustion. She locked the car and strode toward the store. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, their too bright white glow making the air feel sterile, artificial. The convenience store was mostly empty, racks of snacks, dusty coolers humming in the background. A man stood behind the counter, pale and thin, his face washed out under the buzzing lights. She grabbed a water bottle and a protein bar, rubbing her tired eyes. As she stepped toward the register, she caught the clerk watching her. His gaze wasn't curious. It was too steady, too expectant, like he had been waiting for her. "Long drive?" he asked, voice flat. "Yeah," Nina muttered, swiping her card. The machine beeped. The receipt printed. The clerk never broke eye contact. She grabbed her things and turned away quickly. The back of her neck prickled. Stepping outside, she took a bite of her protein bar, then she stopped. Her car door was open, and someone was sitting in the driver's seat. A man. No, not a man. Her stomach twisted violently. The figure in the car was wearing her jacket, holding her phone, adjusting her rearview mirror with casual familiarity. She swallowed hard. The night was too quiet. "Hey," she barked, stepping forward. "What the hell are you doing? Get out of my car." The figure stilled. Then, too slowly, too precisely, it turned its head. Nina's body locked in place. She was looking at herself. Same brown eyes, same chapped lips, same slight furrow between the brows. The same tired face she had seen in the mirror of countless gas station bathrooms. The world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. The figure blinked once, lazily. Then in her own voice it whispered, "I'm you. You need to go." A scream clawed at her throat, but no sound came out. She stumbled back, her heartbeat hammering in her ears. Her hands were shaking. Her legs refused to move. The thing in her car watched her calmly, patiently, like it was waiting for her to accept something obvious. Nina ran. The gas station lights were too bright, too white, casting long, distorted shadows across the pavement. She slammed through the door, gasping. The clerk was already holding the phone. "Call the cops," she shouted. Someone's in my car. They look like me." The clerk didn't react. She clutched the counter. "Did you hear me? Call the cops." The man's head tilted, like he was considering something. Then, too deliberately, he extended the phone toward her. "It's for you." Nina's pulse staggered. The phone kept ringing. She turned, fingers fumbling for her phone in her jacket pocket. Except her jacket wasn't there. Her phone wasn't there. Her pocket vibrated. Her hands clenched around a phone that felt just like hers. Same weight, same shape, but the screen was wrong. No notifications. No apps. No background picture. Just a single text message. She swallowed and tapped it open. Thanks for the ride. A violent shudder rolled through her. No, she whispered. No, no, no. She turned toward the glass door and froze. The reflection of the gas station flickered faintly in the dark glass. The neon sign cast a dull, sickly glow over her shoulder, and her own reflection stood there, staring back at her. Her breath hitched. Her fingers trembled as she reached up, slowly, to touch her cheek. The reflection did not move, not even a blink. Something inside Nina snapped. She staggered back, chest heaving. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. The reflection blinked. A second too late. A breath of cold horror curled through her stomach. The mirrored version of her tilted its head, and then it smiled. Not a natural smile. Not her smile. Something wider, sharper, stretched just a little too far. Then it mouthed two words. You need to go. The buzzing neon lights overhead seemed to whine. The air in the gas station grew thick and suffocating. Nina bolted. She burst through the doors, her shoes skidding against the pavement. Her lungs burned. She ran toward the highway, toward anywhere but here. Behind her, the gas station loomed, its buzzing lights whispering in the silence. Her pulse pounded, her breath ragged. She looked down at the phone in her shaking hands, and the screen changed. A new message appeared beneath the first one. Where are you going? She whipped around. The gas station stood still, fluorescent lights flickering, open as always, and parked right in front. Her car, the driver's seat occupied, her jacket, her phone, her hands gripping the wheel, knuckles pale like she had been driving for hours, and her own face staring at her through the windshield. A slow, steady nod. The car door clicked shut. The engine purred to life. Nina's mouth went dry. Her legs felt frozen to the pavement as the car backed out of the lot, taillights bleeding red into the dark highway. It was leaving. It was leaving without her. Then, the phone in her hand vibrated one last time. A final message. Thanks for the ride. Her throat closed. Her body felt light. Her reflection in the glass door behind her smiled, and in her own voice it whispered, You need to go. The end. Chris sighed and rubbed his temples. His head ached from staring at spreadsheets for too long. The glow of his monitor, the only source of light in the darkened office. 11:12 p.m. He was the last one still working. The evening Zoom call had wrapped up over an hour ago, but he stayed behind, cleaning up tomorrow's pitch deck. Mindlessly, he clicked back to the Zoom window, planning to close it out. That's when he noticed it. Someone else was still in the meeting. Michael Langley. Chris frowned. That didn't make sense. Everyone had logged off. He distinctly remembered Michael saying, "All right, see you tomorrow, guys," before clicking out. But there he was. Michael's video feed was still on. He sat in his usual home office, plain white wall behind him, dim desk lamp casting a dull glow. But something about him was off. He wasn't moving. His expression was frozen, his face illuminated by his screen's glow. Eyes locked onto the camera with a vacant stare. Chris let out a short laugh, trying to shake the unease creeping up his spine. "Hey, Michael," he said, forcing some humor into his voice. You forgot to leave. Michael didn't react, didn't blink. A glitch flickered across the screen, a brief, distorted warping of pixels. Then Michael was suddenly closer to the camera. Chris's stomach dropped. He hadn't moved. There was no change in posture, no shifting of weight, but his face was closer, like the camera had zoomed in on its own. His pupils, which should have caught at least a little light from his monitor, were bottomless black voids. A sharp electronic crackle erupted from Chris's speakers. The sound was harsh, like digital interference mixed with whispering. Then Michael's lips moved. "Don't hang up." Chris recoiled, his breath catching in his throat. The voice was wrong. It had Michael's tone, but was layered, stretched, as if multiple voices were speaking at once, overlapping, twisting over one another in a garbled, broken audio file. The screen flickered again. Michael's head tilted sharply to the right, too far, more than a human neck should allow. His mouth was slightly open now, frozen mid-word, but his expression hadn't changed. Chris felt his pulse hammering in his throat. "Michael." His voice came out quieter than he intended. "Are you okay?" The screen glitched again. For half a second, Michael's face stretched, warped, pixelated. His mouth twisted open wider than it should be, as if something inside his throat was trying to escape. Then, black screen. Chris slammed his laptop shut, his breath coming fast and shallow. The office around him suddenly felt too still. The distant hum of the air conditioning seemed too loud. The glow from the neighboring cubicles cast long, eerie shadows. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. A glitch. That had to be it. Maybe Michael's computer froze or his webcam had bugged out. Yeah, that was it. His phone vibrated violently against the desk. Chris flinched. He hesitated before reaching for it, a terrible feeling creeping up his spine. Incoming Zoom call, Michael. Chris's hands went clammy. His mouth went dry. That wasn't possible. His laptop was closed. The meeting should have ended. His phone kept buzzing. Michael's name. The Zoom interface. The join meeting button. Chris stared at it, his chest tight. His instincts screamed at him not to answer. Then his laptop screen flickered back on. The screen should not have turned on by itself. His inbox suddenly refreshed. A new email appeared at the top. New message. IT department subject, urgent, employee update. Chris's fingers trembled as he clicked it open. To all staff, we regret to inform you that Michael Langley passed away last night at approximately 10:37 p.m. due to a sudden cardiac arrest at his home. Chris's blood ran cold. No, that was impossible. He slowly turned back to his phone. The call was still active, still waiting for him to accept. His laptop screen flashed. The Zoom window reopened by itself. Michael's camera was still on. Chris's breath caught in his throat. Michael was there, watching him, and he was smiling the end. James arrived in Harrow's Hollow just as the sun dipped behind the hills, leaving the town bathed in a dim, dying light. It was the kind of place that felt frozen in time. Narrow streets, peeling paint on old shop fronts, a diner with a flickering neon sign that hummed in the silence. That silence clung to everything. Inside the diner, the air was thick with the scent of coffee and fried food, but the conversations were hushed. Locals stole glances at him, their expressions guarded. When he asked for directions to Elm Street, the room went still. "You don't want to go there," an old woman muttered, stirring her tea without looking up. "Why?" James asked, half amused, half annoyed. A man at the counter, his face shadowed by the brim of his hat, exhaled slowly. "It burns every night at 3. James frowned. "The house?" A nod. "It catches fire every single night. Flames, screaming, smoke pouring out the windows." His fingers tightened around his coffee mug. "But by morning, it's as if nothing ever had happened." James let out a short laugh. "A ghost fire." No one laughed with him. Another voice, softer, from a woman near the jukebox. 50 years it's been burning, and it'll burn again tonight." James felt a chill run through him, but he shook it off. "Well," he said, throwing some bills on the counter, "guess I'll see for myself." The house loomed before him like a blackened carcass. It wasn't charred or crumbling, but something about it felt wrong, as if the wood remembered the flames even if it bore no scars. The windows were dark, empty. The air was still. James checked his watch. 2:59 a.m. Nothing. And then the clock struck 3 a.m. The house erupted. Flames roared from the windows, licking up the walls in searing waves. Thick black smoke billowed into the night, curling against the sky. James stumbled back, coughing, his eyes watering. The heat should have been unbearable. But he felt nothing. Not a single ember touched him. Then came the screams, agonized, wailing voices, twisting, overlapping, trapped in the fire, a chorus of suffering. Shadows writhed behind the flames, reaching, clawing at the windows, their mouths open in silent horror. James' breath hitched, and then the flames vanished. Smoke curled into nothingness. The house stood exactly as it had before, untouched. Not a single ember remained. James staggered backward, his pulse slamming in his ears. What the hell did he just witness? The next morning the house looked completely normal. No scorch marks, no broken windows. James couldn't let it go. He went to the town archives, flipping through brittle newspaper clippings. "Fire consumes home on Elm Street, 1963. His stomach twisted as he scanned the article. The fire had destroyed the house 50 years ago. The cause, unknown. No survivors. But there was one victim. James Monroe. James froze. His hands trembled as he reread the name. Monroe. Not Halstead. It wasn't him. It couldn't be him. But why did his skin crawl? Why did his stomach twist like he already knew the answer? He slammed the file shut. It was just a coincidence, wasn't it? That night at 3 a.m. the house burned again. And this time, James saw a figure inside. A man, standing at the window. And when the figure turned, it was him. James threw his bags into the trunk, his hands shaking. His gut screamed at him to leave, to drive and never look back. By the time he reached the highway, it was nearly 3 a.m. The radio crackled to life. Static, a whispering hiss. Then, through the white noise, a voice, low, distorted, familiar. His fingers clenched around the wheel. He refused to turn around. But then, in the rearview mirror, the house was on fire. Flames devoured the walls, black smoke curling into the night, and standing in the upstairs window was himself, his own face staring back at him from the flames. James let out a strangled gasp. His reflection in the mirror blinked. His real eyes didn't. Then the reflection smiled. James' breath hitched. His foot slammed on the gas pedal, but the car didn't move. The engine was still running. The headlights were on, but the wheels, they weren't turning. He was stuck. The flames in the mirror burned brighter. James' reflection lifted a hand and placed it against the glass. A searing pain bloomed in James' chest. He gasped, clutching at his ribs. His skin burned. But when he looked down, there was nothing there. It was happening. It had already happened. James slowly turned his head toward the house. The figure in the window stepped back, disappearing into the smoke. The fire was inside him now. He understood. He had burned before, and he would burn again. Slowly he opened the car door. The air was cold, but inside his chest the fire raged. He walked toward the flames. The reflection in the rearview mirror vanished, and the house welcomed him home. The end. David found the job listing at 2 a.m., wedged between ads for rideshare gigs and warehouse shifts. Help wanted, night security, no questions, $2,000 per week, immediate start. That was it, no company name, no contact information, just an address. Westwood Mall, the abandoned shopping center on the edge of town. The pay was suspiciously high, but David was broke. He clicked apply. The mall manager was waiting for him at the security desk, an older man with a face that seemed both familiar and impossible to recall. You'll watch the monitors, do your rounds, and log any activity. His voice was flat, rehearsed. One rule, no questions, no matter what you see. David laughed. The man didn't. By midnight, he had settled into the chair, watching silent, looping footage of empty corridors. The food court, dark and abandoned. A row of mannequins frozen in a department store window. At 2:37 a.m., something flickered on the screen. A mannequin had shifted. Not by much, just a tilt of the head. David checked the previous frame. It had definitely been facing forward before. He stood, heart kicking against his ribs. The mall was empty. No one could have moved it. He grabbed his flashlight and did a lap through the stores. Everything looked normal. The mannequin stood where it had before, blank-faced, still. When he returned to his desk, the screen showed it again. Now, it was facing the camera. At 1:45 a.m., David heard footsteps on the ceiling. A steady, deliberate thud, thud, thud moving above him. He stared at the vents. Something was up there, something heavy. The noise stopped. Then his walkie-talkie crackled static. Then a voice, thin, urgent. "David, help me." He jerked upright. No one else was working tonight. His hands shook as he grabbed the radio. "Who is this?" The line went dead. On the security monitors, the mannequins had moved again. David barely made it to work. His stomach churned with unease. At midnight, the security monitors glitched. The feeds went black. Then, one by one, they flickered back on. Except now, every screen showed himself, sitting at the desk. But he wasn't sitting. His breath turned shallow. On the monitors, the other him tilted his head, then turned, looking directly at the camera. David ran. He sprinted through the corridors, past the lifeless mannequins, toward the manager's office. The mall manager was already inside, waiting. David slammed his hands on the desk. "What the hell is this place?" The manager smiled, slow, knowing. "You always ask on the third night." A cold weight settled in David's gut. He turned to the office wall, covered in security photos spanning decades. Then he saw it, a photo of himself in black and white, standing right here. The date on the photo was 20 years ago. David didn't wait. He shoved his things into his bag and bolted for the exit, but the mall doors didn't open. His breath hitched. He yanked the handle. Locked. A sound behind him. He turned. The mannequins were closer. They stood just beyond the security desk, blank faces watching. The mall manager stepped forward, holding a small, yellowed photograph. "You've been here a long time, David." David's pulse pounded. He snatched the photo. It was him, young, smiling, and standing in this very mall. His hands shook. "No, I just got hired." The manager's face didn't change. "Did you?" A whisper echoed from the walkie-talkie. "Help me." David David turned expecting to see the security monitors. Instead, he saw himself, standing at the desk, watching, waiting. His own voice crackled through the radio. "Don't leave me, the door is finally unlocked." David stumbled outside, gasping for air. His hands shook as he pulled out his phone. The call logs were empty. His texts were gone. No records of him ever applying for the job. Then his screen lit up with a new job listing. Help wanted, night security. No questions. His name was already filled in. The end. The road stretched endlessly before Mara, the moon casting a dim silver glow on the asphalt. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel, fatigue settling deep in her bones. Another late shift at the diner, another solitary drive through the mountains, another night where the world felt empty. Her car's headlights carved through the fog, the only illumination on the deserted highway. The radio was off. She hadn't touched it. She preferred the quiet, the hum of the tires against the pavement, the occasional chirp of insects from the surrounding woods, then static, a low hum, faint at first, then crackling into clarity. Mara frowned and glanced at the dashboard. The radio had turned on by itself. The digital screen was blank, no station number, no frequency, just dead air. Then a voice, soft, familiar. Music started playing. Her stomach dropped. It was her voice. Mara's breath hitched. The melody was haunting, slow, curling around the syllables like a whisper in the dark. The lyrics described every move she made in real time. Driving home, eyes so tired, fog rolling in, heart feels wired. She swallowed hard, her pulse hammering against her ribs. She had never recorded a song in her life. She reached for the volume dial, but it didn't respond. The knob wouldn't budge. Her own voice continued singing, left hand gripping, right hand tight. "Mara, don't you see me right?" A chill slithered down her spine. The voice on the radio, her voice grew softer. "Now you see me." A whisper, a warning. Her breath hitched as she glanced up at the rearview mirror. Someone was sitting in the back seat. Mara's scream caught in her throat. She slammed on the brakes, skidding to a stop in the middle of the road. Her body trembled as she squeezed her eyes shut. No, 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 no. This was exhaustion, a trick of the mind. She forced herself to look. The figure was shadowy, blurred by the dim light, not fully formed, not quite real, but there, sitting, waiting. Her own voice hummed through the radio. The figure leaned forward slightly, as if studying her. She couldn't breathe. Her fingers fumbled for the door handle, but she didn't move. Some primal instinct told her not to. If she ran, it would follow. Instead, she whispered, Who are you?" The figure didn't answer. The radio crackled again. "You've heard this before, haven't you?" Mara's head pounded. The voice wasn't hers anymore. It was something else, something beneath her voice. A second layer, a voice she couldn't place, but one that felt familiar in the worst way. The road stretched ahead, dark and endless. She had to move. She gripped the wheel and slammed her foot on the gas. The highway twisted and coiled through the mountains, the fog thickening with each mile. The music started over, the same song. Driving home, eyes so tired, fog rolling in. The same lyrics. Mara's hands trembled. The road ahead looked wrong. She recognized the curve she was about to take. She had already driven this part. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts. She glanced at the dashboard clock. 12:07 a.m. Hadn't it been 12 when the radio first turned on? The figure in the back seat exhaled. She felt it, the warmth against her neck. A tear slipped down her cheek. Time to go home, Mara. The voice was gentle now, a promise, a lullaby. She didn't want to look in the mirror again, but she did. The figure leaned closer, inches from her face. This time she saw its features, her own, but distorted. Eyes too dark, mouth stretched too wide, skin flickering like an old film reel. "I'm what's," Mara screamed. The car veered off the road. Blackness, a distant humming. Mara's eyes fluttered open. The world was too bright, too white. The smell of antiseptic burned her nose. She was in a hospital. A soft voice hummed a melody nearby. A song. Her song. She turned her head. A nurse stood by the window staring out at the pale morning sky, swaying slightly as she hummed. Mara's throat felt like sandpaper. Where am I? The nurse turned, her brows furrowing. "You're awake." Mara swallowed hard. Her body ached. "What happened?" The nurse hesitated. Her gaze softened. "Honey," she sat on the edge of the bed, voice gentle. "You crashed on the highway." Mara's stomach twisted. "But I was just driving." The nurse shook her head. "No, dear." She squeezed Mara's hand. "You crashed 20 years ago." The world spun. The radio crackled softly from the corner of the room. "This one's for you. The end." Lena first noticed something was wrong last Tuesday. She was brushing her hair in the bathroom when she caught it. A split-second lag in the mirror. The brush had already moved past her ear, yet the reflection lingered just a fraction too long, like a bad video stream buffering behind real time. She froze, stared at herself. Nothing. She shifted her weight. The reflection followed, perfectly, seamlessly. Maybe she was just tired. Still, something felt off. She turned off the light and left the bathroom. Except, out of the corner of her eye, her reflection didn't move immediately. A slow shiver unfurled down her spine. She turned back, but the mirror was nothing more than a dark rectangle in the dim bathroom. Had she imagined it? The apartment felt suddenly, suffocatingly quiet. She shut the bathroom door. The next morning, she avoided the mirror altogether. She went about her routine half-blind, brushing her teeth while looking down at the sink. But by the time she needed to leave for work, she couldn't help it. She had to check herself. She turned to the mirror, bracing herself. She raised a hand. The reflection followed. "Okay." She blinked. It didn't. A pulse of ice shot through her veins. Her hand faltered midair, breath catching. The reflection didn't drop its hand immediately. It lingered just a fraction of a second too long, watching her. "No," smiling. She jerked backward, heart hammering. Her reflection never smiled at her. She turned off the light and fled. That night she woke up to tapping. Tap, 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 soft, rhythmic, deliberate. Her eyes fluttered open. The sound was coming from the bathroom. Her chest tightened. Tap, tap, tap. Lena held her breath. It was light, like fingernails against glass. She listened. The apartment was silent otherwise. No cars outside, no humming fridge. Just the tapping. She didn't want to look. She had to look. The bathroom door was open just a sliver, wide enough to see inside. Her stomach dropped. The mirror was fogged up. A trickle of dread crawled through her gut. She hadn't used the shower. And then, a message began forming in the condensation. Lena's breath turned ragged as invisible fingers traced out slow, deliberate letters. Letmeou. She staggered back, pulse pounding against her skull. Then in the dimness, a shape moved inside the glass. She choked on a scream. Something shifted behind the surface, pressing against it. The lights flickered. A slow creak echoed from the mirror as if it were bulging outward. She slammed the bathroom door shut, hands trembling. Racing to the kitchen, she grabbed a roll of duct tape from a drawer, returned, and without daring to look inside, sealed the mirror's edges shut. That night, she slept with the lights on. By Saturday, she had covered every reflective surface in the apartment. Still, it wasn't enough. She saw herself in windows, in silverware, in the black void of her turned-off phone screen, and every single time, it was smiling. That night she dreamed of breaking glass, a sharp crack, a spiderweb of fractures spreading. She woke to the sound of peeling, the duct tape. Her throat went dry. Something was removing it. Her pulse thundered. The air in the room felt too thick, heavy like humidity before a storm. She turned her head slowly. The tape had curled away from the mirror's edges, peeled back in strips as if pulled by invisible fingers. Her reflection was waiting. It grinned. And then it spoke, a whisper, curling against her ear like breath on cold glass. "It's Tina," screamed. The light bulb flickered violently. The air pressed against her, thick and suffocating. The mirror shuddered, its surface warping like a living thing. She ran. She grabbed the desk lamp from her nightstand and hurled it at the mirror. The glass exploded. A gust of cold air blasted outward, a sharp breath from another world. And then her reflection stepped out, a perfect copy, but wrong. It moved with an eerie smoothness, its eyes too bright, too knowing. It stretched its fingers, flexing them like testing a new body. Lena's stomach lurched. She turned to run, but the reflection grabbed her wrists. Its grip was stronger. Lena thrashed, fought, kicked, but it was inevitable. With a final wrenching pull, it shoved her back, straight into the mirror. The cold slammed into her like a wave. Her lungs seized, panic clawing at her throat. She turned and saw herself. No, saw it outside, standing in her apartment. It ran its fingers through its hair, smoothed its stolen hands over its clothes, took a deep, slow breath, like savoring fresh air after a long time trapped underground. Lena pounded against the glass. No, no, the other her turned. Their eyes met. It leaned in close and smiled. Lena opened her mouth to scream, but inside the mirror there was no sound. The next morning, the new Lena got dressed. She fixed her hair. She practiced her voice, and then she walked out the door. The real Lena, she could only watch from the glass from the other side. Trapped forever. The end. Elliot had never lived in a high-rise before. The elevator ride to his 13th floor apartment was always smooth. The walls lined with sleek silver panels, a gentle chime announcing each floor. It smelled of clean linen, fresh paint, and a faint metallic tang, a scent he could never quite place. The kind of building where people kept to themselves. Secure, modern, impersonal, exactly what he needed. His lease mentioned something odd. No 12th floor. Like a lot of buildings, it skipped straight from 11 to 13, a relic of old superstitions designed to keep tenants comfortable. Elliot found it amusing, until the night he pressed the wrong button. Elliot stepped into the empty elevator, rubbing his temple. His eyes burned from too many hours staring at spreadsheets, and the dull ache behind his skull had settled in deep. His hand hovered over the buttons, his vision slightly blurred from exhaustion. 13, but his finger slipped and pressed 12. The button lit up. A quiet hitch in the elevator's hum followed, so brief he almost didn't notice it. Then with a soft ding, the elevator stopped. The door door slid open, and Elliot felt his stomach drop. The hallway stretched before him, but this wasn't right. The walls were off-white but stained, smudged with something yellowed and oily at the corners. The wallpaper, where it still clung to the walls, had begun peeling in long, curling strips. The air smelled stagnant, like dust, mold, and something faintly metallic. The lights buzzed faintly, flickering just enough to make the shadows jump and shift. Every apartment door was slightly ajar. The air felt heavy, pressing against his skin like unspoken words. His gut twisted. This floor should be empty. It should not exist. And yet, here it was. He could still turn back, step inside the elevator, press 13 and forget about this. But something compelled him forward. His shoes scuffed against the dry carpet. The sound was too loud in the silence. Then he saw it. Apartment 1207. His apartment. Exactly the same. Same worn-out couch, same bookshelf, same half-full coffee mug from this morning, but everything was coated in a thick layer of dust. Dust so dense it blurred the edges of the furniture, settling in the grooves of the wooden floor like fine ash. A deep, ice-cold fear curled in his stomach. This wasn't just a replica, this was his apartment, or maybe it had been. Then from inside, a voice, muffled, his voice. Elliot's breath caught. The bedroom door stood partially open. From the dim crack of light something moved, a slow, deliberate shift of shadow, a footstep, a rustling like fabric against skin. Elliot's chest tightened, his mind screamed at him to run, but his legs were locked in place. Then the whispering began, not from the bedroom, from the walls. A low, murmuring breath as though something was breathing with him. Soft, rhythmic, too close. Elliot's skin crawled. He swallowed, pulse hammering against his ribs. The whispering grew clearer. It wasn't just breathing anymore. It was words. Words in his own voice. But the words were wrong. Not spoken, not human. Like a recording played backward, warped and stretched. Something inside the walls was speaking him. Elliot's muscles finally snapped free. He bolted. The elevator doors stood open, but they wouldn't close. He slammed his hand on the closed door button, breath coming in ragged, frantic gasps. Close, close. A footstep behind him, the lights flickered, and then he saw it. A man stepped into the hallway, a man with his face, but not his face. The eyes were too dark, the expression too calm, too knowing, a twin, a reflection but distorted, the wrong version. The doppelganger tilted its head, its mouth moved, lips forming words without sound. Then it whispered. Elliot heard the words, and his mind refused to understand them. The sound scraped against his skull, familiar but alien, a message meant for something beneath his skin. Something deep inside him fractured. The elevator doors slammed shut. Elliot stumbled into his apartment, gasping. His hands were shaking. His skin burned like something had brushed against his very essence. Without thinking, he grabbed a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer. Back in the elevator, he pried open the panel. His fingers hovered over the button for the 12th floor. It was still there, waiting. With a deep shaking breath, he deleted it, erased, gone. The elevator doors slid shut. Relief crashed over him. It was over. It had to be over. That night, as he lay in bed, the silence felt too deep. Like the walls were holding their breath, like something was listening. Then a whisper, soft, persistent, right by his ear. Let me out. The end. The cafe was warm, a golden glow spilling from the hanging lights. The hum of quiet conversation wrapping around Laura like a soft blanket. It smelled of roasted coffee beans and vanilla, a scent she normally found comforting. She sat at a small round table, checking her phone for the 5th time. No messages. She sighed, glancing at the door just as a man stepped in. Caleb, tall, lean, with dark eyes that seemed deeper than they should be. His smile was slow, deliberate. When he reached her table, he pulled out the chair and sat down without breaking eye contact. "Laura," he said smoothly, his voice rich like honey dissolving in warm tea. She forced a nervous laugh. "Then you must be Caleb." They fell into easy conversation, stories about childhood, bad first dates, dream vacations. He was charming, attentive. He listened to every word she said like she was the only person in the world. An hour passed, then 2. She checked her phone again. Battery dead. Her stomach twisted. A waiter passed by, clearing a nearby table. She glanced at the cafe's large window. Outside, the streetlights cast a familiar glow onto the sidewalk. Everything felt normal, but something wasn't. Laura yawned, stretching her arms. "Wow, we've been here a while." Caleb's lips curled into that slow, deliberate smile again. "Good conversation makes time disappear." She chuckled, but something about his words made her shiver. She glanced at her watch. 12:03 a.m. Her eyes darted to the entrance. The cafe closed at 10. Her breath caught in her throat. The murmur of voices was gone. The waiters were gone. The barista was gone. A few other customers. Gone. The cafe was silent, just her and Caleb. Her chair scraped against the floor as she stood. "I think She stopped. The street outside was black. Not dim, not quiet, just black. Like the world had been swallowed whole. Her hands trembled as she turned to Caleb. He was watching her with that same smile. "They left," he said softly, "but we're still here." Her breath hitched. "What do you mean?" His head tilted slightly. "Sit down, Laura." She didn't. Instead, she took a step toward the door, gripping the metal handle. Locked. She jerked it, pulled harder. Nothing. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She spun around, scanning the cafe. It was the same except for the stillness. No music playing, no hum of an espresso machine, no distant laughter from a table in the corner. Just her, just Caleb. She turned toward the window, pressing her palm against the glass. And then her stomach plummeted. She was still sitting at the table, talking, smiling, laughing. The her in the window sipped from her coffee, tossing her head back at something Caleb had said. Her real hands, the ones she could feel, were pressed against the window. Her reflection's hands were on the table. She stumbled back, shaking. "What is this?" she whispered. Caleb stood slowly, smoothing out his shirt. "We're having a wonderful time, Laura." No, I'm not. I'm standing right here." His dark eyes flickered to the window. "Are you?" Her pulse pounded in her ears. She reached out again, touching the glass. Her reflection didn't mimic the movement. It just kept talking. Her fingers curled into fists. "Let me out." Caleb stepped closer. Too close. "I can't do that," he murmured. "You're part of this now." Her breath came in ragged gasps. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. She turned, sprinting for the back of the cafe. There had to be an exit, a fire escape, a back door, something. She slammed into a hallway, past the kitchen. No cooks, no dishes in the sink, no smells of food. The world outside the kitchen door should have been there, but there was only black. Not darkness, not an alley, just nothing, a void. A sob caught in her throat. A soft voice whispered behind her, "Laura." She spun around. Caleb stood just feet away. His smile was gone. "Please," she begged. "I don't know what's happening." His eyes didn't soften. "Time disappears in good conversation," he murmured. She bolted back through the hallway. herself. Her reflection was still there, still laughing, still talking, as if the date had never ended. Her real hand slammed against the window. "Look at me," she screamed at her other self. "Nothing." Caleb approached behind her, his voice barely above a whisper. "You left," he said, "but you're still here." She whipped around. "What does that mean?" He blinked. For the first time he blinked. The cafe lights flickered. The reflection of herself, still laughing, still sipping coffee, began to fade. Her real body, it felt like it was fading too. She backed against the glass, but it didn't feel like glass anymore. It felt like a veil, a thin, dissolving line. Her voice broke. "Please." Caleb tilted his head. "Would you like another coffee?" And then the cafe lights shut off. The end. Danny hated the night shift. It was lonely, stretched longer than his tired mind could handle, and the fluorescent lights overhead buzzed like trapped insects in the walls. But tonight was worse. Inventory check, that's what his supervisor had called it, sliding a clipboard across the counter. "The old psychiatric ward?" Danny asked, frowning. "I thought it was shut down years ago." "It was." "Then why?" "Just do the inventory, Danny." She turned away quickly, too quickly. A bad feeling settled in his chest as he walked toward the locked double doors at the end of the hallway. The air changed the moment he stepped inside. Thick, wrong. It was the kind of silence that felt alive, watching. The overhead lights buzzed, flickering in and out of life, casting long, twitching shadows across the linoleum floor. The walls smelled of disinfectant, but underneath that, something stale, like wet paper and old breath. Down the corridor, metal doors lined the walls, each with a small, circular window at eye level. Danny shivered. The glass was reflective, and as he passed, his own face stared back at him from each one. The hospital had emptied this wing decades ago. There shouldn't be anything in here. Then, a whisper, soft, too close. His name. Danny froze. His throat went dry as his flashlight beam swung across the hallway. Nothing. He exhaled shakily, forcing himself forward. Just get the job done, in and out. But as he passed the last door, the whisper returned. "Danny." The sound slithered from the walls, a voice both near and impossibly far. Danny's skin prickled. Then from inside one of the rooms, a tap, like fingers against glass. He stopped, slowly turned his head, a single observation window staring back at him. There was something inside, a figure standing just out of the flashlight's reach. Danny's breath hitched. Then the figure moved, a flicker of motion. A hand pressed against the glass. The lights overhead buzzed violently, flickering into darkness for a split second. When they came back, the window was empty. Danny's pulse thundered in his ears. The hallway stretched out ahead of him, longer than before. His hands were shaking as he reached the nurse's station. The wooden desk sat in the center of the room, layered in dust. The patient files were stacked neatly in a pile, the pages yellowed, brittle with age. He picked one up. Admitted 1981, deceased 1982. The next, admitted 1975, deceased 1979. One by one, he flipped through them, all names from over 40 years ago. Then at the bottom of the pile, a fresh folder. His fingers trembled as he turned it over. The tab was crisp, white, brand new. A single name was printed on it. Admitted February 7th, 2025. His stomach dropped. The whispers returned, crawling from the walls, spilling from the ceiling vents, the air suddenly thick with breath. "You've always been here." Danny spun, flashlight cutting through the dimness. Nothing. The voices rose, overlapping. His name, repeated 100 times, curling in on itself like a chorus of hushed, hungry things. Then, the lights went out. Pitch black. The whispering stopped. For a moment there was only silence. Then, soft, rhythmic footsteps, slow, coming closer. Danny fumbled for his flashlight. His pulse roared in his ears. The footsteps stopped just behind him. The flashlight clicked on. A mirror. And in its reflection, a figure stood behind him. A man in nurse's scrubs, identical to his own. Only his eyes were hollow. Your shift starts now. The light died again, and in the dark, something reached for him. Danny screamed. The morning staff arrived, chatting about their weekends as they passed through the hospital corridors, a janitor pushing a cart past the old psychiatric wing. The doors were locked. As always, inside, dust coated the floors, untouched. The air was still. At the nurse's station, the desk was empty. No files, no sign anyone had ever been there. Later that morning, the hospital director checked the employee records. There was a new entry. Danny Carter, admitted February 7th, 2025. The system glitched for a second. Then under status, a single word appeared: active. The end. The subway station smelled of damp concrete and something else, something stale, like forgotten air trapped beneath the city for too long. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with an uneven hum, casting shadows that twitched and stretched along the cracked tiled walls. Jake checked his phone. No signal. Typical. The last train was running late. He sighed, rubbing the exhaustion from his face. The platform was nearly deserted, save for a lone vending machine humming softly near the turnstiles and a tattered subway map peeling from the wall. He hated late-night commutes. The silence, the emptiness, it made the station feel less like a place and more like a waiting room between worlds. Then, from the corner of his eye, he noticed movement. An old woman shuffled toward the bench and lowered herself beside him. She wore a faded green coat, buttoned to her throat, and a scarf that smelled faintly of lavender and mothballs. Her fingers, thin and brittle-looking, folded neatly in her lap. She smiled at him. "You always take this train, don't you?" Jake frowned. The question felt too familiar, like the echo of a dream he couldn't quite recall. "I've never seen you before," he muttered, shifting slightly away from her. The woman laughed, a dry, whispery sound like leaves scraping along pavement. "I see you every night." A chill prickled the back of his neck. The tunnel ahead remained dark, yawning endlessly. No sign of the train. He tapped his foot, anxious to be home. The woman kept watching him. "You must be mistaken," he said, forcing a polite smile. "I don't take this train often." Her smile deepened. "Ah, but you will." A low, metallic groan echoed through the station as the train's headlights finally cut through the darkness. The wind rushed past, bringing with it the scent of rust and rain. The doors hissed open. Jake stood, eager to leave the woman behind. She remained on the bench, watching him with that knowing smile. He hesitated. "Aren't you getting on?" She shook her head. "Not tonight." The doors began to close. The woman lifted a frail hand and waved. Then, she was gone. Jake's stomach clenched. The train lurched forward. He turned to the window, searching for her on the platform. But the station was empty. And then he saw it. Where the station sign should have been, where the familiar name of his stop should be, glowing softly in blue letters. There was something else. A date, February 7th, 2014. Jake's mouth went dry. That wasn't right. That was 10 years ago. A glitch, he reasoned. Just a glitch. But something gnawed at the edges of his mind. A whisper of unease. His reflection in the window smirked at him. Jake's breath hitched. He wasn't smirking. He lifted a shaking hand to his face. His reflection didn't move. A heavy stillness pressed against his chest. Slowly, he turned his gaze to the rest of the train. The other passengers sat motionless, their faces obscured in shadows. They were too still, not asleep, not resting, just waiting. Jake swallowed hard. The train wasn't moving. He pressed his palm against the cool metal of the exit doors. Nothing. The air grew thick, suffocating. Then, a whisper close to his ear. "You always take this train." Jake spun. The old woman was sitting beside him again. His legs locked. His pulse roared in his ears. She hadn't entered the train. He was sure of it. Yet, there she was, her hands folded neatly in her lap, that same lavender and mothball scent clinging to the air. She leaned in. "It's time to remember." And suddenly, he did. A flash of headlights, the screech of brakes, a sickening thud, the weight of steel, the cold bite of metal pressing against bone, pain, sharp, unforgiving. The last train. Jake staggered back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He turned toward the window again. His reflection stared back. Not his reflection, but the man he used to be. The man from 10 years ago. His old jacket, his old backpack, the clothes he had worn that night. The passengers, those frozen figures, exhaled in unison, their breath curling in the stale air. A scent of rust and damp earth thickened. Jake clutched the seat for support. "No," he whispered. "No, this isn't." The train jolted. The lights flickered. The station reappeared outside the window. The doors slid open. The woman smiled at him, tilting her head toward the empty platform. "It's time to go home, Jake." His vision blurred. He turned to the waiting darkness beyond the doors. Something deep inside him knew. If he didn't step off now, he never would. The train doors let out a mechanical sigh. Jake hesitated. Then slowly, he stepped off the train. The doors closed behind him. The last train pulled away. And Jake, he faded from the platform. The end. Mia had babysat for a lot of families, but none like the Fairchilds. Their house was too perfect, the kind of clean that made her feel like an intruder just by breathing inside it. Everything gleamed. Polished oak floors, a spotless white couch, marble countertops that reflected the soft glow of overhead lights. It smelled faintly of something sweet but artificial, like the air fresheners in department stores. Mrs. Fairchild adjusted her pearl earring as she spoke, her voice crisp. "Oliver's bedtime is 9 p.m. sharp, no exceptions." Mr. Fairchild gave a quick nod. "Once he's in bed, do not disturb him." Mia forced a smile, feeling oddly uneasy. "Got it, 9 p.m. Mrs. Fairchild hesitated, then placed a gentle hand on Mia's arm. "We mean it, dear." Her fingers were ice cold. Then they were gone, their car disappearing down the driveway, leaving Mia alone with Oliver. Oliver was a quiet kid, too quiet. He sat at the dining table, drawing with a red crayon. The rest of the crayons lay untouched, their colors dull under the dim kitchen light. Mia leaned over to look. "What you drawing?" It was a house, a closet door, and something behind it. Oliver didn't answer. He just kept coloring. "You don't talk much, huh?" Mia tried again, hoping to pull him out of whatever world he was in. Oliver finally looked up. His eyes were a strange, glass-like blue. the kind that almost reflected light. I'm not supposed to talk too much, he said softly. Mia laughed, trying to lighten the mood. Who told you that? Oliver hesitated. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, Oliver did. A cold, sharp chill prickled the back of Mia's neck. She tried to laugh again, but the sound came out forced. Aren't you Oliver? Oliver's gaze flicked to the clock. 8:59 p.m. His chair scraped against the floor as he stood up. Without another word, he walked out of the kitchen, across the too-clean hallway and into his room. Then he stepped into his closet and shut the door. Click, Mia frowned. Oliver, silence. She stepped closer. Hey buddy, why'd you? From inside the closet a whisper. Please don't open the door. Mia's stomach twisted. Why not? Silence. Then so soft she almost didn't hear it. If you open it, I won't be Oliver anymore. The air in the room thickened, pressing in around her. Mia let out a shaky breath. Okay, do you want me to sit outside the door? Silence. Then, a faint scratching from inside the closet. Mia swallowed. Oliver, are you? It's not me. Her blood turned to ice. She stumbled back, nearly tripping over herself in her rush to get out of the room. The hallway light seemed dimmer than before, the walls closing in around her. She fumbled for her phone. No service, not even Wi-Fi. The house was too quiet. Not the normal kind of quiet, but something else, something wrong. Mia turned, hurrying toward the stairs. Thump. She froze. A single heavy step from inside the closet. Not Oliver's. Too heavy. Then the whisper. Still small, still fragile. Promise me, Mia. Please don't open it. Mia ran. She sat on the couch, arms wrapped around herself. The house felt off balance, like something had shifted, but nothing happened. No sounds, no movement. Just the weight of something unseen pressing against her chest. By 9:45 p.m., she had convinced herself that maybe, just maybe, Oliver was just a weird kid with weird habits. By 10 p.m., she heard the car pull into the driveway. The Fairchilds were home. Mia practically ran to meet them. Mrs. Fairchild barely had time to take off her coat before Mia started speaking, the words tumbling out in a rush. Something's wrong with Oliver, she blurted. At 9 p.m., he locked himself in the closet and told me not to open it. I swear I heard. She stopped, because Mr. and Mrs. Fairchild weren't confused. They weren't concerned. They were silent. And then, slowly they exchanged a look. Not just a look, recognition. Mia's stomach dropped. Mrs. Fairchild turned to her, voice calm, too calm. Which Oliver are you talking about? Mia's throat went dry. Upstairs from Oliver's room, click. The closet door creaked open, and then footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming down the stairs. Mia turned toward the staircase, her breath catching in her throat. A shadow stretched across the hallway floor. Not Oliver's, too tall. The air turned cold. And then a voice, soft, gentle. Hi, Mia. The lights flickered. The end. "2:37 a.m. Liam sat hunched over his laptop, the glow of the screen the only illumination in his small apartment. Outside, the city was quiet, save for the occasional distant siren. Inside, the only sound was the faint hum of his ceiling fan. The walls felt closer at this hour, the darkness outside pressing against the windows. He should have been asleep hours ago. Instead, he was doom-scrolling, clicking through forgotten corners of the internet where dead forums and ancient websites sat abandoned, like digital graveyards. That's when he found it. A chat room. It looked old, the kind of website that shouldn't still be running. The design was basic, black background, white monospace text. No avatars, no modern UI, just a list of active users on the right side. But the usernames weren't names, just numbers. 55987. His cursor hovered over the chat box. The site had a strange, lifeless quality to it, like a room no one had been inside for years, yet people were here, or at least something was. He hesitated, then typed, "Liam, anyone here?" For a few seconds, nothing. Then a response. "Liam." A chill ran down his spine. His real name. He never used his real name online. Another message popped up. "It's been 5 years. Are you back?" Liam's breath hitched. His hands hovered over the keyboard. 5 years? That didn't make sense. He had never been here before. Had he? His stomach clenched as he scrolled upward. That's when he saw them. His own messages. 5 years ago. The chat history was filled with his own words. Pages of conversation he didn't remember having. His username sat there, plain as day. Just Liam. His fingers trembled as he kept reading. "I don't feel right. It's like I'm splitting." That's how it begins. What's happening? "One of you has to stay." A sickening unease curled in his stomach. "One of you has to stay." He swallowed and scrolled further. The final message from his past self made his blood turn to ice. "Liam, I don't want to be here anymore." Then, nothing. Just an empty void of silence. A conversation cut off, like someone stepping away from a phone call but never coming back. Liam sat frozen, fingers digging into his desk. His past self had been in this chat, had spoken to these numbers, but he had no memory of it. His laptop screen glitched, a flicker, a brief warping of text like a VHS tape eaten by static. Then, a notification popped up. A new user had joined the chat. Liam's stomach nodded. The username made his blood turn to ice. Liam 2. A message appeared. Liam 2. You left, but something else stayed and now it's coming back. His pulse stuttered. What the hell did that mean? The screen glitched again, but this time it didn't recover. His reflection in the darkened monitor wasn't moving like him. Liam's breath grew shallow. He turned his head slowly, just a fraction, then looked back. The figure in the screen was still staring forward, a fraction behind, like a delay in a video call, except there was no camera lag, no delay, just something watching. His gaze flicked down. The webcam light was on. His chest tightened. He hadn't turned it on. Something was watching, a soft click. Liam's entire body jerked. His bedroom door had been closed. Now it was slightly open. A sliver of darkness spilled into the room. The hallway beyond was unlit, blacker than it should have been. For a moment there was nothing. No sound, no movement. Then the shadows shifted. Not like something walking past. Not a trick of the light. A slow, deliberate movement. Liam's fingers twitched, but he didn't reach for the laptop. Didn't move at all. His ears strained. His breath caught in his throat. His gaze flicked back to the screen. The chat room was completely black. Only a single blinking cursor remained. Then a message appeared. Liam 2, welcome back. A deep, suffocating dread settled into his bones. The laptop screen flickered, then shut off. The room was plunged into near darkness. The only light left was the tiny, unblinking red glow of the webcam. And then, a breath, not his, close, right behind him. Liam's body went rigid. His skin prickled, every nerve in his body screaming at him to run, but he couldn't. He could only sit there, trapped in his own skin, feeling the undeniable presence of someone else in the room. His muscles locked. Something shifted in the darkness, a faint rustle, a slow dragging sound like fabric scraping against the floor. Then, fingertips, cold, barely there, pressing against the back of his neck. A hand, He could feel it now, too light, too hesitant, like something unfamiliar with human touch. His stomach lurched, the fingers pressed harder, and then they pulled. Liam's vision blurred. His breath came out in sharp panic gasps. He twisted, lunging out of the chair. But the screen came back on. A final message burned into the chat window, glowing against the black. You left, but something stayed, and now it's taking you back. The webcam feed flickered to life, and on the screen, sitting exactly where he had been a second ago, was him. But it wasn't him. It was smiling. The laptop screen snapped shut, and the darkness swallowed everything. The end. The fluorescent lights in the office flickered. Evan glanced at his monitor, the clock in the corner reading 11:47 p.m. The floor was silent, save for the rhythmic hum of the building's air conditioning. Everyone else had long since gone home, leaving him with nothing but lines of code and the pressure of an impossible deadline. Evan sighed and saved his work. The glowing letters on his screen blurred as fatigue dragged at him. Grabbing his bag, he muttered, "Enough for today," and headed to the elevator. The lobby on his floor stretched out before him, sterile and devoid of life. The tap of his shoes echoed unnaturally loud as he approached the elevator. When he pressed the down button, the faint ding of the elevator arriving made him feel a glimmer of relief. But as the doors opened and he stepped inside, he noticed something odd. There was no L button for the lobby, only a single, unmarked button at the bottom of the panel. A wave of confusion prickled the back of his neck. His floor, the lobby, the executive levels, they were all missing from the panel. He stared for a long moment before hesitantly pressing the unmarked button. The doors shut with an unsettlingly quiet swoosh, and the elevator lurched downward, but it didn't stop. The floor numbers above the door cycled down 2-1, B1, B2. Then it went blank. The hum of the elevator grew louder, a deep, resonant drone that vibrated through Evan's chest. He gripped the railing, his unease blooming into something sharper as the elevator slowed to a stop. The doors opened. Before him stretched a dim hallway lined with frosted glass office doors, the faint, sterile smell of industrial cleaner heavy in the air. Evan frowned. This floor didn't exist, at least not on the building's blueprints. He'd seen them a dozen times when helping set up the office's new server room. Yet here it was, with no signage or number to indicate its purpose. "Hello." His voice echoed softly down the hall, answered only by silence. Unease coiled in his stomach. He stepped out of the elevator, turning back just in time to see the doors snap shut behind him. The elevator's button panel blinked off. He pressed the call button. Nothing. A slow dread settled over him. His eyes scanned the endless stretch of identical office doors ahead. Frosted glass panes distorted the dark interiors of the rooms, casting faint, flickering shadows that didn't seem tied to any source. Something rustled behind one of the doors. He froze, his ears straining. Whispers, soft and indistinct, trickled through the hallway. They were faint, like a breeze carrying voices just out of reach. Evan, his breath hitched. The whisper was unmistakable. Someone had said his name. His voice cracked as he backed away from the door. The sound of his name came again, layered over itself, as though a dozen voices whispered in unison. Shadows moved behind the frosted glass, drifting closer to the door, and Evan's legs locked in place. Then came the knock, A sharp, deliberate knock reverberated from the office door in front of him, sending a jolt of terror through his chest. He stumbled backward, bumping into the wall. The door's handle jiggled, but it didn't open. Heart pounding, Evan turned and bolted down the hallway. Doors lined either side of him, each identical, each office filled with empty desks and dim lighting. But something was wrong. No matter how far he ran, the hallway stretched on. Each turn he took brought him back to the same intersection, the same stretch of doors. The whispers followed him, growing louder with every step. More voices joined in, a chorus of soft murmurs echoing his name. Evan, at the end of the hallway, he spotted a flickering light spilling from one of the offices. Desperation drove him forward. He pushed through the door, slamming it shut behind him, only to find himself staring at a familiar sight, his own cubicle. It wasn't just similar, it was identical. His desk, his monitor, his half-empty coffee mug from that morning, everything was there. He crept closer, his hand trembling as he reached for the desk. The coffee was still warm. "No, this isn't real," he whispered. The room felt too cold, the air too still. The monitor flickered to life, and a video began to play. It was of him. He watched himself sitting at the same desk, working late, his face drawn with exhaustion. The camera angle shifted, showing him slumped over the keyboard, his breath slowing until his chest stilled. Evan staggered back, bile rising in his throat. "No," he gasped, "I didn't. This isn't." The whispers grew louder, and the door behind him creaked open. Frosted glass distorted the figures standing just beyond the threshold. Faces pressed against the glass, faint and shadowed, their eyes locked onto him, their mouths moving in unison. "Stay," they whispered. "You belong here." Evan turned and ran. The hallway seemed to warp around him, growing narrower, the walls pressing closer. Every door he passed revealed more fragments of his life. Failures at work, fights with his family, nights spent alone as he chose work over everything else. The images grew more vivid, each office a mirror of his regrets. He skidded to a halt as the elevator loomed before him again, its doors open, glowing faintly. Relief flooded him, and he lunged inside, slamming the button for the lobby. The doors began to close, but just before they did, a hand shot through the gap. It was gray and cold, its fingers thin and unnaturally long. It pried the doors apart, and a face loomed out of the darkness. It was his face. The doppelganger smiled, its eyes empty and black as it whispered, "You're one of us now." The elevator plunged downward, faster and faster, the hum turning into a deafening roar. Evan screamed as the walls of the elevator warped, the floor dissolving beneath his feet. He fell into darkness, the whispers rising to a crescendo around him. Weeks later, the cleaning crew found Evan's cubicle exactly as he'd left it, his half-empty coffee mug still sitting beside his keyboard, his computer screen aglow with lines of unfinished code. On the 13th floor, listed nowhere on the building's plans, the lights flickered, and faint whispers echoed down the endless hallway. The end. The Victorian manor stood like a weary sentinel at the edge of the forest, its peeling paint and sagging beams a testament to years of neglect. The project was a dream for Ryan, a contractor known for taking old, forgotten spaces and making them beautiful again. The elderly owner, Mrs. Hargrove, had hired him to transform the house into a cozy bed and breakfast, a place where she could live out her final years surrounded by the warmth of visitors. This house has its quirks. she said the first day, her wrinkled hands twisting nervously around her cane. But some things are better left as they are. Ryan nodded, not fully listening. Old houses always had quirks, creaky floors, strange drafts, maybe a ghost story or two. That was part of their charm. He'd smiled and assured her he could handle whatever the house threw at him. He didn't know then that the house was listening. It was in the second week of renovations that Ryan discovered the door. He'd been clearing out the attic, a musty space filled with crumbling boxes and forgotten furniture. The air was heavy with the scent of rot, and the only light came from his flashlight beam slicing through the gloom. He was moving an old wardrobe when he noticed it. A small dark door, barely 3 feet high, nestled into the far wall. Its wood was blackened with age, and a rusted iron keyhole glared up at him like an unblinking eye. Odd, he muttered, crouching to inspect it. The door didn't appear on any of the blueprints he'd reviewed, and the wall it was set into shouldn't have had space behind it. He pressed his ear to the wood, listening, but heard nothing. When he mentioned it to Mrs. Hargrove, her face turned pale. "You didn't open it, did you?" she asked sharply. "No," Ryan said, taken aback. "It's locked." "Good," she said, her voice trembling. "Don't. That door isn't meant to be opened." Ryan frowned. "Why? What's behind it?" Mrs. Hargrove didn't answer. She only shook her head and shuffled away, muttering something under her breath. The door lingered in Ryan's mind. He told himself it was just curiosity, the kind of curiosity that came with his job. But the more he tried to forget about it, the more it pulled at him. Every night, he dreamed of it. The dark wood, the iron keyhole, the faint hum that seemed to come from behind it in his sleep. By the third day, he couldn't resist anymore. He returned to the attic with a crowbar. His flashlight cast long shadows across the slanted ceiling as he knelt before the door. "Just a look," he whispered to himself, his breath misting in the cold air. "I'll patch it up after." The wood groaned as he pried at the frame. With a final snap, the lock gave way and the door creaked open. Beyond it was a small windowless room, empty except for a single chair positioned in the center. Opposite the chair, leaning against the far wall, was a tall, oval mirror. The glass was cloudy, its edges chipped, but Ryan could see his reflection faintly, distorted by the uneven surface. A chill ran down his spine. The room was wrong, too cold, too quiet. The air pressed against him, heavy and oppressive. He backed away, the door swinging shut behind him. The first sign that something was off came the next day. As Ryan worked on the kitchen cabinets, he felt it, a prickling at the back of his neck, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. He turned, expecting to see Mrs. Hargrove, but the room was empty. Later, while polishing a window, he caught his reflection staring back at him. Not just staring, watching. Its movements lagged behind his own, a split-second delay that sent his heart racing. He stepped back, blinking, and the reflection snapped back to normal. He laughed nervously, brushing it off as exhaustion. But the feeling didn't go away. By the end of the week, Ryan's movements grew sluggish. His arms felt heavy, his legs unsteady, as though invisible strings were pulling him in directions he didn't want to go. The house felt alive, its creaks and groans taking on a rhythm that seemed deliberate. Shadows in the corners stretched unnaturally, and every reflective surface, the mirrors, the windows, even the polished wood of the banister, seemed to hold faint echoes of his face, always watching, always waiting. He tried to avoid the attic, but the door haunted him. In his dreams, he saw the chair, the mirror, and his own reflection staring back at him, hollow-eyed and still. The whispers began soon after, faint and indistinct, calling his name in the dead of night. On the seventh day, he couldn't take it anymore. Ryan climbed the attic stairs, his flashlight trembling in his hand. The small door was still there, the black wood untouched despite his earlier attempts to force it open. He knelt before it, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He didn't want to open it again, but the pull was too strong. He pushed the door open. The room had changed. Instead of one chair, there were dozens, arranged in neat rows, all facing the mirror. The chairs were mismatched, some simple and wooden, others ornate with intricate carvings, but each one was occupied by a reflection. Ryan's heart pounded as he stepped inside, his flashlight beam sweeping across the mirror. The reflections were all different versions of himself. Older, younger, some pale and gaunt, others twisted and grotesque. They sat rigid in their chairs, their glassy eyes fixed on the mirror. In the reflection, he saw himself stepping into the room, but the Ryan in the mirror wasn't holding a flashlight. He was smiling. Panic surged as Ryan turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind him. The mirror began to hum, a low vibration that rattled his teeth. The reflections stood in unison, their movements jerky and unnatural. "Let me out," Ryan screamed, pounding on the door. His fists made no sound against the wood. When he turned back, the reflections were closer, their expressions blank, their eyes black voids. The Ryan in the mirror stepped forward, placing a hand against the glass. "It's your turn now," it whispered, its voice distorted and hollow. Ryan felt himself being pulled, his limbs no longer his own. He stumbled toward the chair at the center of the room, his body jerking like a marionette. He tried to fight, but the strings were too strong. His reflection sat down, and in the mirror, the door creaked open. When Mrs. Hargrove found the attic later that week, she sighed and closed the door without looking inside. She'd warned him. They never listened. The next contractor would come soon, lured by the promise of the old house's charm, and the mirror would be waiting. From within the room, Ryan sat among the others, his glassy eyes fixed on the mirror. His reflection stared back, alive and free, walking out of the house into the sunlight. The real Ryan screamed silently, but no sound escaped. He was just another reflection now, watching, waiting the end. The fire station in Green Hollow was a relic of another time. Its red brick facade and tall bell tower were holdovers from an era when horse-drawn carriages hauled water tanks. Though the town itself had grown quiet over the years, the station remained staffed by a handful of firefighters who saw more false alarms and stray cats than actual emergencies. Jake Larson, the rookie on the team, couldn't believe how laid back the job was. He'd come from the city, expecting adrenaline and action, but Green Hollow seemed frozen in time. The crew spent their days polishing the trucks, playing cards, and recounting old stories. But there was one story they never joked about: the midnight alarms. It was a week into Jake's first shift when he heard about it. "You'll hear it sooner or later," said Captain Mills, the gray-haired veteran who'd been with the station for decades. "The fifth alarm." Jake frowned. "What's the fifth alarm?" Mills exchanged a glance with the other firefighters. Finally, it was Garcia, a burly man with a deep voice, who answered. "Sometimes the alarm goes off at midnight," Garcia said, "but it's not real. You don't answer it. Jake chuckled nervously. You're messing with me. No one's messing with you, Mills said, his voice firm. You don't answer it. Do your checks, sit tight, and let it ring. That's an order. The tension in the room was palpable, the usual camaraderie replaced with unease. The first time Jake heard the midnight alarm, it sent a chill down his spine. The firehouse was silent, the crew fast asleep in the bunks when the klaxon shattered the stillness. Its wail was deafening, reverberating through the station as the emergency lights flashed red. Jake bolted upright, adrenaline kicking in. He reached for his gear, but stopped when he noticed no one else was moving. Captain Mills sat up slowly in his bunk, his face grim. Go back to sleep, rookie, he said. But the alarm. It's not for us, Mills interrupted. Confused and frustrated, Jake hesitated before reluctantly lying back down. The alarm continued for a few minutes, then fell silent. The second time the alarm went off, Jake couldn't ignore it. He'd been restless, sitting alone in the kitchen, when the wail started again. It was louder this time, more urgent, like a cry for help. Jake stood, staring at the glowing red beacon on the wall. His heart pounded as he remembered Garcia's warning, but his instincts as a firefighter screamed at him to act. Why do we ignore it? He asked aloud, though no one was there to answer. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. What if it's real? By the third midnight alarm, curiosity won. Jake suited up quietly, careful not to wake the others, and slipped into the driver's seat of the engine. The alarm's coordinates flashed on the screen, leading to a house at the edge of town. The drive through the empty streets was eerie. The snow-covered roads reflected the flashing lights of the engine, and the wail of the siren echoed into the void. When Jake arrived, his breath caught. The house was engulfed in flames, the inferno roaring against the midnight sky. Dark smoke billowed upward, blotting out the stars. But what struck him most was the silence. No neighbors, no sounds of panic, just the relentless crackle of fire. Jake grabbed his gear and ran toward the house. As he approached, he heard screams, high-pitched and desperate. Figures moved frantically behind the glowing windows, their silhouettes distorted by the flames. I'm coming, Jake shouted, his voice cracking. He smashed through the front door, heat slamming into him like a wave. The air inside was thick and suffocating, but he pushed forward, scanning for survivors. In the living room he saw them, shadowy figures huddled together, their faces obscured. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, as if they were marionettes on invisible strings. Let's get out of here, Jake yelled, reaching for the closest figure. Its head snapped toward him. The face wasn't human. Jake stumbled backward, his stomach lurching. The figure's hollow eyes and gaping mouth emitted a soundless scream, and its skin was charred, its edges flickering like burnt paper. The other figures turned toward him as well, their distorted faces stretching into grotesque masks of agony. Jake ran. The house seemed to shift around him, the hallways elongating as the flames licked closer. The screaming figures followed, their steps eerily synchronized. When he burst through the front door, the house collapsed behind him in a shower of sparks. He sprinted to the engine and threw it into reverse, his hands shaking. Back at the station, Jake burst through the doors, drenched in sweat and reeking of smoke. What the hell were you thinking? Mills growled, already waiting for him. Jake froze. You knew. Mills's face was pale, his eyes hollow. We warned you. Jake's voice rose. There was a fire. I saw people in there, if you can even call them that. What's happening here? Mills sighed heavily. The fifth alarm is from the past, he said. That fire happened over 30 years ago. A whole family died because we didn't get there in time. Some say it was our fault. The chief back then ignored the first call, thought it was a prank. Garcia added grimly, the alarm started coming back after the station was rebuilt. It's a reminder, or maybe a punishment. Jake sat down hard, his mind racing. You're telling me this happens to all of you? No, Mills said, just to the ones who answer it. Jake's stomach sank. What does that mean? You saw them, didn't you? Mills asked quietly. Jake nodded, his throat dry. You've been marked. The next few days were a blur. Jake tried to focus on work, but the station felt colder, the shadows longer. He avoided mirrors, certain he'd see something behind him. The alarm didn't go off again until the following week. This time it rang at exactly midnight, louder than ever. Jake's hands trembled as he sat in his bunk, trying to ignore it. But when he looked at the others, they were already awake, staring at him with pity. It's for you now, Mills said softly. Jake didn't respond, but he didn't need to. The alarm's pull was too strong, its wail cutting through his resolve like a knife. He stood, walking toward the engine as if in a trance. Mills called after him. You don't have to go, but Jake knew it was too late. The next morning, Jake's bunk was empty, his gear missing. The other firefighters didn't speak of him, just as they hadn't spoken of the others who had answered the fifth alarm before him. The station remained silent, waiting for the next midnight call. The end. The estate stood silent and foreboding on the fog-choked moor, its crumbling facade barely visible through the shifting gray mist. Dr. Eleanor Blackwood, an archaeologist with a reputation for chasing myths, clutched the ornate key she had unearthed. Its intricate, curling patterns seemed almost alive under her fingertips, as though it pulsed faintly with the beat of her own heart. You shouldn't go back there, warned the innkeeper as she prepared to leave that morning. No one who unlocks that door comes back the same. Eleanor had laughed off the warning. Superstition was a language she didn't speak. The key was real, its craftsmanship centuries old, and it matched the strange lock she had found hidden behind a bookcase in the library of the long-abandoned Blackthorn estate. It was a discovery she couldn't ignore. Now, standing before the estate's towering doors, Eleanor hesitated. The wind howled through the gaps in the stonework, carrying faint whispers she told herself were tricks of the wind. She squared her shoulders, the key tight in her grasp, and pushed the heavy door open. Inside the estate was a graveyard of dust and silence. Her footsteps echoed faintly as she made her way to the library, its air heavy with the scent of mildew and forgotten books. The hidden lock waited just where she'd found it, embedded in the wall beneath a faded oil painting of a dark-haired woman, whose eyes seemed to follow Eleanor's every move. She slid the key into the lock, the metal fitting with an almost unnatural ease. A deep click echoed through the room as the hidden door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling downward into the darkness. Eleanor hesitated. Every rational part of her mind urged her to turn back. But the thrill of discovery burned brighter. She flicked on her flashlight and descended, each step creaking under her weight. The staircase ended in a circular chamber. The walls were lined with shelves of crumbling books and jars filled with indiscernible, cloudy liquids. But what drew Eleanor's attention was the massive object in the center of the room. A tall mirror, its surface hidden beneath a black velvet covering. The mirror's size was unnatural, easily twice her height and framed with ornate carvings that writhed like shadows in the flickering beam of her flashlight. She reached out and hesitated, her hand inches from the fabric. "It's just a mirror," she whispered, as if to convince herself. With one swift motion, she pulled the velvet free. The surface gleamed like polished obsidian, reflecting her face perfectly. But as she stared, something about her reflection unsettled her. It seemed wrong. The edges of the mirror shimmered, and Eleanor realized her reflection wasn't quite matching her movements. She tilted her head. The image tilted a fraction slower. She stepped back, but her reflection lingered for an impossible moment before following. "Ridiculous," she muttered, though her voice cracked slightly. She turned to leave, but froze. The room had changed. The staircase was gone, replaced by smooth stone walls. The shelves now stood empty, the jars shattered. The air felt heavier, colder. The beam of her flashlight wavered as she turned back toward the mirror. Her reflection was still there, but it wasn't her anymore. The figure in the glass was twisted, its face an exaggeration of her own. The cheekbones were sharper, the eyes hollow, and the grin stretched impossibly wide. It raised a hand and waved, though Eleanor hadn't moved. Panic clawed at her chest. She stumbled backward, her flashlight clattering to the ground. "This isn't real," she whispered. "It's not real." The mirror rippled, the surface distorting like water, and images began to appear. At first she saw memories, moments from her life replayed in haunting detail. Her first expedition, the triumph on her face as she unearthed an ancient relic. Then the darker memories, the argument with her mentor that had cost her her reputation, the funeral she hadn't attended because she'd been chasing a discovery halfway across the world. The images shifted faster and faster, blurring together until they became a chaotic montage of her failures and regrets. "No," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "Stop." The mirror obeyed, but what it showed next froze her blood. It was the future, or what seemed to be. She saw herself wandering the estate, her eyes vacant and hollow. Then she was on the moor, standing in the fog as shadowy figures surrounded her, their forms whispering and writhing like smoke. She saw herself in the chamber, screaming soundlessly as the mirror swallowed her whole. She backed away, her chest heaving. The distorted version of herself in the mirror grinned wider, stepping closer to the surface. Its hand pressed against the glass, the dark liquid-like surface rippling outward. The room dimmed as the shadows deepened, coiling around Eleanor like living things. She tried to scream, but her voice was stolen by the suffocating silence. The figure in the mirror leaned closer until its face filled the glass. Its hollow eyes met hers, and it whispered in her voice, "You opened the door. Now I'm free." The glass shattered with a deafening crash, and Eleanor was plunged into darkness. When she woke, she was standing on the moor, the estate looming behind her. The fog had thinned, and the faint glow of dawn painted the horizon. She blinked, disoriented, her heart racing as she tried to piece together what had happened. Her hands felt strange. She raised them to her face and froze. Her fingers were no longer hers. They were pale and sharp. The skin stretched unnaturally tight over the bone. She stumbled toward a shallow puddle nearby, the water reflecting the faint light. Her face was no longer her own. It was the face of the reflection. The twisted grin, the hollow eyes. She let out a strangled scream that echoed unnaturally across the moor. And then she heard it, her voice, faint and distant, calling from the direction of the estate. "Help me," it cried. "Please." She turned toward the sound, but deep down she knew the real Eleanor was still in the chamber, trapped on the other side of the mirror. And now she was just a shadow, wandering the moors, waiting for the next soul to find the key. The end. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead as Zoe settled into the librarian's desk for another overnight shift. The library's archive system cast a faint glow from the screen in front of her, its rows of folders a quiet reminder of the endless hours ahead. She'd taken the job for solitude, a break from the chaos of the outside world. Most nights the hours passed in predictable silence, interrupted only by the occasional shuffle of a patron too deep in their studies to notice the time. But tonight felt different. The library was empty, the air heavy with a strange stillness. Even the ever-present sounds of the city outside seemed muted. Zoe shook the unease from her mind and logged into the digital archive system, intent on making a dent in the backlog of file reorganization. She clicked through folders, each one more mundane than the last. Historical maps, rare book index, local newspapers. It was routine, almost mind-numbing, until she saw the folder. It was buried deep in the system, tucked beneath layers of subfolders. Midnight Patrons, it read. The name stood out, odd and out of place. Zoe hesitated before clicking it open. Inside was a list of names, each accompanied by a photograph and a timestamp. At first she thought it was some kind of old attendance log, but as she scrolled, her unease deepened. The timestamps didn't make sense. They were all set in the future. Tomorrow, next week, next month. And the descriptions next to each name chilled her to the bone. Helen Grayson, 3:12 a.m., victim of hit and run, Elm Street. Liam Ortega, 8:47 p.m., reported missing, presumed dead. Martha Flynn, 2:30 p.m., apartment fire, unable to escape. The photos attached to each name showed faces frozen in unsuspecting moments, smiling, laughing, going about their lives, blissfully unaware of the grim fates detailed beside their names. Zoe leaned back in her chair, her pulse racing. "What the hell is this?" she whispered to herself. The following morning, Zoe couldn't shake the folder from her mind. She told herself it was some kind of morbid prank, an elaborate joke left behind by a bored archivist. But as she scrolled through her phone during lunch, a headline stopped her cold. Hit and run victim identified as Helen Grayson. The timestamp in the article matched exactly. Her stomach churned. It couldn't be a coincidence. She returned to the library that night, her hands trembling as she logged back into the archive system. The Midnight Patrons folder was still there, but now the list had grown. More names, more faces, more detailed descriptions of tragedies yet to occur. Zoe clicked through the entries, dread pooling in her chest. She recognized some of the faces now, local patrons who frequented the library, a man who always checked out history books, a young woman who loved Victorian literature. Their names were followed by grim fates, all time stamped for the near future. She had to do something. Zoe spent hours trying to delete the folder, but the system wouldn't allow it. Every time she clicked delete, the screen flickered, and the folder reappeared as if mocking her. She tried erasing the entries individually, but they returned as quickly as she removed them. "Come on," she muttered, her voice shaking. She unplugged the computer, her breath catching in her throat. But when she turned it back on, the folder was still there, bigger now, with even more names. At the bottom of the list, her own name appeared. Zoe Marshall, 2:17 a.m., cause of death, TBD. The photo next to her name was fresh. It showed her sitting at the desk, staring at the screen with wide eyes, exactly as she was now. The clock on the wall read 1:49 a.m. Panic set in as Zoe scrambled to make sense of what was happening. She checked the library's security cameras, but the feeds were distorted, glitching in and out. The usual hum of the fluorescent lights was gone, replaced by a faint static that seemed to crawl into her ears. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the floor, pooling in the corners of the room like ink. And then she heard it. Footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, echoing down the empty halls. Zoe froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The library was supposed to be locked. She checked the doors herself. "Hello," she called, her voice barely more than a whisper. No answer. The footsteps grew louder, closer. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911, but the call wouldn't connect. The screen flickered, static filling her ears as the Midnight Patrons folder opened on its own, the screen glowing brighter than before. Her photo moved. The version of her in the image turned its head, staring straight at her, and smiled. The footsteps stopped. A shadow fell across the desk. Zoe turned slowly, her breath catching as she saw him. The figure was tall and gaunt, shrouded in darkness. His face was obscured by a black hood, but his presence was suffocating, filling the room with a cold, oppressive weight. "Who are you?" she choked out, backing away. The figure didn't answer. He moved closer, his steps unnervingly silent, despite the weight of his presence. Zoe stumbled, her legs trembling as she tried to put distance between them. But no matter how far she moved, he was always closer than before. The figure raised a hand, long and skeletal, and pointed to the screen. The folder expanded, her name glowing brighter than the rest. "It's not predicting them," Zoe whispered, the realization hitting her like a blow. "It's making them happen." The figure tilted his head, as though pleased. The clock on the wall struck 2:17 a.m. The last thing Zoe saw was the screen, her photo shifting as the timestamp disappeared. The cause of death filled itself in, the words clear and final. Zoe Marshall, 2:17 a.m., taken by the Midnight Archivist. The library was silent once more. When the morning crew arrived, they found the desk empty, Zoe's chair pushed neatly under the table. Her belongings were untouched, her laptop powered off. No one knew where she had gone. The Midnight Patrons folder remained, buried deep in the archive system, waiting for the next night. And when someone opened it, they would find a new name at the bottom of the list. Yours. The end. The sleek lines of the high-rise towered above the city, its reflective glass exterior gleaming in the sunlight. On the 30th floor, Adam Voss, a tech mogul known for his obsession with control and precision, had finally found the perfect home. The apartment was a marvel of modern design. Minimalist furniture, walls lined with cutting-edge tech, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the skyline. But one detail didn't fit. In the corner of the sprawling apartment was a windowless, unmarked door. The door was made of reinforced steel, painted to match the walls, almost as if the designer had tried to hide it. When Adam first noticed it, he frowned. "What's behind this?" The realtor hesitated. "It's a storage room, I think. No one's opened it in years." Adam arched an eyebrow. "And the key?" The realtor shrugged. "Lost." It was the only imperfection in an otherwise flawless space. Adam didn't like imperfections. The first night in the apartment, Adam lay awake in his sleek, king-sized bed, the city lights casting faint patterns across the ceiling. It was quiet, eerily so, until he heard it, a faint scratching sound. At first he thought it was coming from the walls, but as he sat up, the sound grew more distinct, more deliberate. It was coming from the locked room. The next morning, Adam called building maintenance. 2 workers arrived, armed with tools and crowbars, but after hours of effort, the door remained firmly shut. "Something's off about this," one of the workers muttered. Adam crossed his arms, glaring at the sealed door. "I'll handle it." He had the money, after all. Within a week, Adam had installed cameras and motion sensors throughout the apartment, all linked to his state-of-the-art security system. If anything moved near that door, he'd know. But the second night, the scratching returned. Adam checked the live feed on his phone, his heart racing. But the camera aimed at the door showed nothing, no movement, no sound. The next morning, when he reviewed the footage, the recording cut out precisely at 3:12 a.m., just as the noises began. Adam didn't believe in ghosts, but his jaw tightened as unease settled in. Days passed, and the scratching grew louder, more insistent. It started earlier each night, until Adam could no longer ignore it. One night, as the sound echoed through the apartment, he approached the door, his heart hammering in his chest. "What do you want?" he demanded. The scratching stopped. For a moment there was only silence. Then slowly, a single shadow slid out from under the door, pooling at his feet. Adam stumbled back, nearly tripping over the edge of the carpet. But when he flipped on the lights, the shadow was gone. Adam's sleep became fragmented, his dreams filled with suffocating darkness and whispers he couldn't quite understand. The shadows in his apartment grew darker, stretching unnaturally in the corners of the room. One morning, as he brushed his teeth, he noticed something strange in the mirror. The reflection of the locked door seemed wrong. The faint outline of a figure stood in its place, just behind him. When Adam whipped around, the space was empty. Desperation drove him to hire a locksmith, a wiry man with a toolbox and a cocky attitude. "Never met a lock I couldn't open," the man bragged as he set to work. But after an hour of drilling and prying, the locksmith stepped back, pale and sweating. "This door's not normal," he muttered. "It's like it doesn't want to be opened." Adam wrote him a check and sent him away, anger and fear simmering just below the surface. That night, the shadows spilled out from under the door again, creeping across the floor like ink spreading through water. Adam stood frozen, watching as they climbed the walls and snaked toward the windows. His smart lights flickered, plunging the apartment into brief bursts of darkness. In the shadows, he saw movement, glimpses of figures, thin and angular, their hollow eyes glinting. One of them whispered his name. Adam stopped leaving the apartment, consumed by the mystery of the room. He canceled meetings, ignored calls, and barricaded himself in his office. His once pristine apartment became cluttered with papers, tools, and blueprints as he tried to find answers. He combed through the building's records, but there was no mention of the locked room in the original blueprints. It was as if it had always been there, yet never existed. On the 5th night, the scratching didn't come. Instead, the door creaked open. Adam started, his breath caught in his throat. The room beyond was pitch black, the kind of darkness that seemed to absorb the light. A voice, low and resonant, echoed from within. "You've stayed too long." Against every instinct, Adam stepped closer. His curiosity overpowered his fear as he peered into the room. The shadows shifted, forming shapes, hands, faces reaching toward him. "You are the anchor," the voice said. "What does that mean?" Adam whispered, his voice trembling. "You let us in." The shadows lunged and Adam screamed. Days later, the building's concierge noticed that Adam hadn't been seen in some time. When the police arrived to check on him, they found the apartment pristine. The cameras, lights, and tools were gone, and there was no sign anyone had ever lived there, except for the locked door. It remained, its surface unmarked and its secrets intact, waiting for the next tenant. The end. The neon sign outside the deserter buzzed faintly, casting a flickering glow over the empty parking lot. Inside, Marcy leaned on the counter, her fingers tracing idle patterns in a puddle of spilled coffee. It was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that seeped into your bones and made you feel like the last person alive. She glanced at the clock on the wall, 11:59 p.m. Almost closing time. The hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen was the only sound accompanying her. The few stragglers had paid and gone hours ago, leaving just her, the diner, and the desert stretching endlessly beyond the glass windows. Then the phone rang. The sharp jangle made her jump. She frowned and stared at the phone mounted on the wall behind the counter. Who would call at this hour? No one ever did. She hesitated before picking up. "Hello." Silence stretched across the line. Then, a faint voice broke through, crackling with static. "There's going to be a crash," the voice whispered. "A truck on Route 15, 3 miles out, at dawn." Marcy's skin prickled. "What? Who is this?" The line clicked dead. She stood frozen, the receiver pressed against her ear, her pulse racing. A prank, she decided. Some weirdo trying to freak her out. She hung up and shook her head, brushing it off as nothing. By the time she finished cleaning the counter, the strange call was already fading from her mind. The next morning, the crash was all over the news. A semi-truck overturned on Route 15, spilling its cargo and causing a pileup. 3 dead, 2 injured. Exactly where the voice had said it would happen. Marcy stared at the TV mounted in the corner of the diner, her stomach churning. She wanted to dismiss it as a coincidence, but a gnawing unease settled deep inside her. She didn't tell anyone about the call. Who would believe her? That night at precisely 12 a.m. the phone rang again. Her hand trembled as she picked it up. "Hello." "Tomorrow night," the voice whispered, low and rasping. "A fire at the motel on the edge of town." "Who are you?" Marcy demanded, her voice shaky. "What do you want?" The line went silent. Then came the click of disconnection. Marcy slammed the phone down, her heart hammering. She couldn't ignore it this time. She called the police, told them about the fire. They dismissed her, their voices tinged with polite disbelief. The next night, the fire consumed the entire motel. 2 people died, their charred remains pulled from the rubble. Marcy watched the footage on the news with a sick feeling in her stomach. This wasn't a coincidence. Whoever was calling her, whatever was calling her, knew what was going to happen. The calls kept coming. Night after night, the phone rang at midnight. The voice on the other end recited horrors like a script. A car crash, a drowning, a violent robbery. Each time Marcy tried to warn someone, the police, the victims, anyone who would listen. And each time the tragedies unfolded exactly as foretold. And then the voice turned personal. "They're coming for your sister tomorrow. She shouldn't go into town. Marcy's blood ran cold. What? No. Who's coming for her? What are you talking about? You can't stop it, the voice said, eerily calm. No one can stop it. She didn't sleep that night. At dawn, she called her sister, begging her to stay home. But her sister laughed it off and went about her day. By evening, she was dead, struck by a stray bullet during a store robbery in town. Marcy spiraled. The guilt consumed her, and the late-night calls became her obsession. She began waiting by the phone at night, dreading the sound of its ring, but unable to stop herself from answering. She tried to trace the number, but every attempt came up empty. The calls didn't seem to come from anywhere or anyone. One night, she decided to stay late at the diner, determined to confront whoever or whatever was behind the calls. She kept a notebook by the phone, filled with every prediction, every detail, every plea she had made to stop the inevitable. At midnight, the phone rang. Her hand hovered over the receiver, trembling. She let it ring twice before finally picking up. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Why are you doing this to me?" The voice hesitated, as though it hadn't expected the question. "You know who I am," it said finally. The static on the line seemed to deepen, like a low hum crawling under her skin. "No," she whispered. "I don't." The voice grew louder, angrier. "Yes, you do." And then she heard it clearly, her own voice, layered beneath the static. It wasn't just the voice. It was her. Marcy's world tilted. She hung up the phone and stared at it, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She stumbled to the office in the back of the diner, pulling up the call logs on the ancient phone system. Her stomach dropped. Every call was listed as originating from the diner itself. The phone had been calling her. She didn't sleep that night, or the next. By the third night, she felt like she was losing her grip on reality. She refused to pick up the phone at midnight, letting it ring until the sound became unbearable. Finally, on the seventh night, the phone didn't ring. Relief flooded her until it rang 5 minutes later. She hesitated, then snatched the receiver off the hook. "What do you want from me?" she screamed. Her voice was desperate, panicked. "You have to stop. Don't answer the call. You can't answer it." "What are you talking about? You'll trap us here. Don't answer." The line cut off abruptly, leaving only the hum of dead air. Marcy's hands shook as she hung up, but her relief was short-lived when the phone rang again. The sound was louder this time, more insistent. Against her better judgment, she picked up. "Hello." There was no answer, only a faint echo of her own voice. Her stomach dropped as realization washed over her. She was no longer on the other end of the call. She was the caller. And as the receiver in her hand crackled to life, she whispered, "There's going to be a crash. The end." The hotel was an architectural marvel, standing tall and resplendent amidst the chaos of the city. Its tagline, "The quietest place in the city," was what drew Amelia Grant, a high-powered marketing executive in desperate need of solace, to its doors. She had spent the past month in unrelenting meetings, client calls, and sleepless nights, her mind a whirlwind of deadlines and demands. The promise of complete silence was irresistible. The lobby was opulent, with polished marble floors, gilded mirrors, and soft ambient lighting. Even with the bustling city just beyond its doors, the air was unnervingly still, as if the sound itself dared not intrude. A concierge with a serene smile handed her a brass key. "Room 1408, he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. you'll find it most accommodating." Amelia offered a polite nod, hardly registering the peculiar phrasing, and ascended in the whisper-quiet elevator. She relished the absence of background noise. No dinging elevator chime, no muffled chatter, just silence. When she entered her room, she was struck by its elegance. Plush carpets swallowed the sound of her heels as she walked in, and the walls were wrapped in thick, textured fabric. The windows were triple glazed, ensuring no noise from the streets below could seep in. The silence wrapped around her like a warm, invisible blanket. For the first time in weeks, Amelia felt herself exhale. The first day passed in blissful quiet. She worked for a few hours, her laptop the only source of sound. Later, she soaked in the oversized tub, letting the absence of noise lull her into tranquility. She fell asleep early, cocooned in the hotel's luxurious silence. But the peace didn't last. Around midnight, Amelia woke up with a start. She wasn't sure why at first. Her room was as quiet as ever. But as she strained her ears, she thought she heard something faint, a soft shuffling sound, like footsteps, just outside her door. She sat up, her pulse quickening. She waited, the seconds stretching into minutes, but the sound didn't return. Telling herself it was her imagination, she lay back down and eventually drifted off. The next day, Amelia mentioned the noise to the concierge as she passed through the lobby. "I heard footsteps outside my room last night," she said casually. "Is there another guest nearby?" The concierge's smile faltered just slightly. "No, Miss Grant. Your floor is entirely unoccupied, except for you. Our soundproofing is unparalleled. It's likely a stray sound from the street below." Amelia frowned but didn't press further. The city was a noisy place after all. That evening, she decided to explore the room. It was something she always did in hotels, a habit born of curiosity. She checked the drawers, ran her fingers along the bookshelves, and peeked inside the closet. It was in the bedside table that she found it, a thick, leather-bound ledger. The book looked old, its cover cracked and edges worn. Inside, names were written in neat handwriting, row after row, each one crossed out in red ink. She flipped through the pages, the unease in her stomach growing. The last entry stopped her cold. The page was blank, save for one name written in fresh ink, Amelia Grant. Her breath hitched. She slammed the ledger shut and shoved it back into the drawer, heart racing. A dozen rationalizations flickered through her mind. Maybe it was a prank, or a coincidence, or something the hotel did as part of its ambience. Still, she couldn't shake the image of her name, written so carefully. That night, Amelia heard the noises again, faint but unmistakable. Footsteps, soft and measured, as if someone was pacing just outside her door. Then, a low murmur, too indistinct to make out words. And finally the worst, a child's laughter, high-pitched and chilling, floating through the suffocating silence. Amelia bolted upright in bed, her skin crawling. She rushed to the door and yanked it open, expecting to catch someone in the act. The hallway was empty, bathed in dim, golden light. There were no children in the hotel, she reminded herself. The concierge had said the floor was empty. Her hands trembled as she locked the door and pressed her back against it. For hours, she sat awake, listening. The noises continued, faint and relentless, until the first light of dawn. By the third night, Amelia was unraveling. Exhausted and unnerved, she returned to the ledger, drawn to it despite her fear. She flipped through the pages again, stopping at the crossed-out names. Something clicked in her mind. Each name felt oddly familiar, like faces you can't quite place. Then she realized They were names she had seen in the news over the years. Missing persons who had vanished without a trace. The realization chilled her to the bone. Desperation overtook her. She stormed down to the lobby, clutching the ledger. "What is this?" she demanded, slamming the book on the concierge's desk. The man didn't flinch. He looked at her with pity, his calm demeanor unchanged. "It's the record of our guests," he said softly. "And now, Miss Grant, it's your turn." She stumbled back, her mind spinning. "What do you mean, my turn? What is this place?" The concierge tilted his head almost sympathetically. "The hotel thrives on silence, you see. It must remain the quietest place in the city, and for that it must feed." Amelia's blood ran cold. She backed away, but the man's voice followed her. "Your screams will be the last sound you make. After that, you'll become part of the quiet." Panicking, Amelia fled to her room, slamming the door shut. She grabbed her phone to call for help, but there was no signal. There never had been. She screamed in frustration, pounding on the walls, her own voice echoing back at her. And then she heard it, her own scream, replaying in a twisted, distorted loop, growing softer with each repetition until it faded entirely. The silence returned, heavier than ever. She turned to see the ledger on her bedside table, though she was certain she had left it downstairs. Her name, once written in fresh ink, was now crossed out in red. The door creaked open. Shadows flooded in, bringing with them a cold, suffocating stillness. Amelia tried to scream again, but no sound came out. When the staff entered her room the next morning, it was pristine, untouched. The bed was perfectly made. The only trace of Amelia was her name, neatly crossed out in the ledger. The silence in room 1408 was perfect once more. The end. The village wasn't on any map. I found it by accident, taking a wrong turn while driving through the winding mountain roads. My GPS had long since lost signal, and the sun was beginning to dip behind the jagged peaks. The golden hues of the fading day made the remote village below seem warm and inviting, nestled in a valley surrounded by dense forest. Relieved to see signs of civilization, I parked my car near the entrance and walked in. A stone arch marked the gateway, carved with symbols I didn't recognize. A warm, spicy scent filled the air, mingling with the sound of laughter and music. "Welcome." A man greeted me warmly, his face weathered, but his smile wide. He wore a rough-spun cloak, its edges embroidered with intricate patterns. "You've arrived just in time for our harvest feast." "Oh, I'm just passing through," I said. "I didn't mean to intrude." "Nonsense," he replied, clapping me on the shoulder. "All are welcome at the feast. It is an honor to host a traveler. You must join us. To leave before it is done, well, that wouldn't be wise." There was something in his tone, light, but with an undertone that prickled at my nerves. Before I could respond, a group of villagers approached, their smiles almost too wide, too eager. They ushered me toward the village square, where long tables were laid out beneath glowing lanterns, their light flickering green against the twilight. The feast was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Plates overflowed with food, breads, roasted meats, fruits that shimmered as if dusted with gold. The bonfire at the center of the square burned high and bright, its flames an unnatural green that cast eerie shadows over the villagers' faces. "Eat, eat," an elderly woman urged, pressing a plate into my hands. The food smelled intoxicating, but there was something off about it. The meat was too dark, the fruit's juice stained my fingers like ink. Then the bread crumbled strangely in my mouth, leaving a bitter aftertaste. I tried to ask questions, where I was, what they were celebrating, but the villagers grew silent, their smiles faltering for the first time. "It's tradition," one of them said finally before turning back to their food. I should have left then, but the villagers were insistent, watching me with eyes that gleamed in the green firelight. "The feast is sacred," they said. "You must stay until it ends." The music grew louder as the night went on, strange and haunting. I couldn't place the instruments, flutes perhaps, or something like them, but the notes were dissonant, crawling under my skin. I noticed then how the villagers moved, their dancing jerky and stiff like puppets on strings. Their faces seemed to blur in the firelight, their features shifting and shimmering. A cold dread crept into my chest. I tried to leave, making excuses about needing to get back on the road, but the man who had greeted me blocked my path. "The feast is not yet over," he said, his smile sharp now, almost predatory. "To leave before the final fire burns out is forbidden." "Forbidden?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. Instead, he gestured to the tables, where the food seemed to glisten in the firelight, as though sweating. "Eat," he said. "Join the celebration." I ate reluctantly, forcing down bites as the villagers watched. The food, once strange but tolerable, now tasted rancid, and I felt a wave of nausea with every bite. My limbs grew heavy, my head foggy, and the air seemed thicker, pressing down on me like a weight. When I glanced at the fire, I froze. In its flickering flames, I saw my reflection, but it wasn't solid. My form was faint, translucent, as though I were a ghost, or becoming one. I rubbed my eyes, convinced it was a trick of the light, but when I looked again, the image was clearer. My face was pale, my eyes sunken, and my body seemed to shimmer as though unraveling into smoke. "Are you all right?" a woman asked, her voice too sweet, too concerned. "I need to leave," I stammered, standing on shaky legs. The villagers closed in around me. Their smiles were gone now, their faces drawn and haggard, their eyes hollow. The firelight cast deep shadows across their features, and I realized with dawning horror that some of them weren't entirely human. Their skin seemed to ripple, their limbs stretching unnaturally long in the green glow. Their eyes burned with the same unnatural light, and their hands, gnarled claw-like, reached for me. "The feast must go on," the man said, his voice cold and final. I tried to run, but my legs gave out beneath me, my strength drained. The villagers dragged me back to the table, their hands like iron. My reflection in the fire grew fainter with each passing second, the edges of my form dissolving into the flames. "You honor us," one of them whispered, their voice no longer human. "Your sacrifice will sustain us." I struggled, but it was no use. My body felt weightless, as though I were already slipping away. Around me the villagers' true forms were revealed, twisted shadows of the people they had once been, their faces hollow masks, their bodies warped and broken. You're not alive," I gasped. "We were," the man said, his voice echoing with centuries of sorrow. "But life is fleeting. The feast keeps us preserved, sustained, and for that we must take." The green fire roared higher, and I felt its heat consuming me, pulling me in. My vision blurred, and the last thing I saw was my reflection, faint and flickering, before it vanished completely. The next morning, the villagers celebrated the end of the feast. The bonfire had burned out, and the tables were empty, save for scraps of food. The valley was quiet once more, the air heavy with the scent of ash and earth, and in the green-tinted shadows of the forest, the villagers waited for the next traveler to lose their way. The end. Thunder growled in the distance as 12 strangers shuffled into the grand dining hall of the isolated mansion. The storm had come out of nowhere, the rain hammering against the windows and rattling the old glass panes. Candles flickered on the long mahogany table, casting shadows that danced across the ornately decorated walls. Each guest had received the same invitation, a handwritten card signed only "Your Host," promising an evening of fine dining and entertainment. No one knew who had sent it, but the allure of mystery and the promise of opulence was too tempting to resist. At the head of the table stood an old grandfather clock, its pendulum swinging in eerie silence. Above it hung an oil painting of a masked figure, its gaze following the guests as they took their seats. "Bit odd, isn't it?" muttered a man in a tailored suit as he adjusted his cufflinks. No host, no introductions, and 12 strangers, all gathered in the middle of nowhere, added a woman with sharp eyes and a sleek black dress. Feels like the setup for a murder mystery. The others chuckled nervously, but their laughter faded as one of them pointed toward the table. "Why are there 13 place settings?" The table was set with meticulous care, gleaming silverware, porcelain plates, and crystal goblets. 12 guests, yet 13 chairs. The group exchanged uneasy glances. One chair, positioned near the center, remained empty. Its place setting was identical to the others, save for a silver knife-turned blade up on the plate. As the storm intensified, the power flickered and went out entirely. The only light came from the candelabra on the table, their flames casting long shadows that stretched and twisted unnaturally. "I don't like this," muttered a nervous young man in glasses. "This is strange." "Strange," said an older woman with a pearl necklace. "It's absurd. No host, no explanation in this storm." She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes fixed on the empty chair. For a brief moment she thought she saw something, a figure sitting there, its outline faint and flickering like a mirage. She blinked, and the chair was empty again. "Are you all right?" another guest asked, frowning. "Yes, never mind," the woman said, shaking her head. But the unease in her voice was palpable. As the meal progressed, the atmosphere grew heavier, the silence between conversations punctuated by the occasional crash of thunder. The guests tried to keep up small talk, but the tension in the air was suffocating. Then the first disappearance happened. The man excused himself to the bathroom, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Minutes passed, then longer. Someone joked about him getting lost in the mansion, but when another guest went to check, the hallway was empty. The man was gone. He probably stepped outside for air, someone offered, though the storm outside made that unlikely. Then they noticed. The empty chair at the table was no longer empty. A goblet of wine sat half-finished, as though someone had just taken a drink. The whispers started after the second guest disappeared. It was subtle at first, a faint murmuring just at the edge of hearing. The guests looked around, but no one spoke. The whispers grew louder, taking on words they couldn't quite make out. One guest swore they heard their name. Another said the shadows on the walls were moving against the candlelight, creeping toward them like living things. Panic began to rise. "Who brought us here?" demanded a man with a grizzled beard. "This isn't a dinner party. It's some kind of sick joke. Or a trap," another added, glaring at the others. "Someone here knows what's going on." Accusations flew, tempers flaring as the remaining guests began to suspect one another. That's when the woman with the pearls stood, her face pale as she pointed a trembling finger. "There," she whispered, "the 13th guest. Don't you see them?" The others turned, but the chair was empty. "You're imagining things," the sharp-eyed woman said, though her voice lacked conviction. "There's no one there," but the older woman shook her head. "I saw them, standing right behind you." The guests froze, each suddenly feeling the oppressive weight of unseen eyes on their backs. The whispers swirled again, louder this time, forming disjointed phrases. "Why did you leave me? Don't you remember? You can't hide." As the night dragged on, the guests began confessing secrets, seemingly compelled by the growing tension. A wealthy businessman admitted to ruining lives with his schemes. A school teacher revealed she'd abandoned a friend in need. Another confessed to an affair that destroyed a marriage. With each confession, the storm outside grew louder, the wind rattling the windows like an angry beast. One by one, the guests disappeared, their chairs left vacant, the remaining goblets filled with wine that none of them had poured, the crimson liquid staining the tablecloth like blood. It wasn't until there were only 3 left, Ryan, the young man with glasses, Sophia, the sharp-eyed woman, and Lila, the woman with pearls, that the truth began to surface. "I remember now," Ryan said, his voice trembling. He stared at the empty chair, his face pale and drawn. "The accident, we were all there." "What accident?" Sophia snapped, her tone sharp with fear. "The crash," Ryan whispered. "A car overturned in the storm. Someone was trapped. We left them there." "No," Lila said, shaking her head violently. "That's not true. I don't remember anything like that." But the whispers grew louder, overlapping with the thunder. "You remember," they hissed. "You all remember." Ryan stood suddenly, knocking over his chair. "It's them, the person we left behind. That's who the 13th guest is." Lila broke into quiet sobs, burying her face in her hands. Sophia glared at the empty chair, her lips curling in defiance. "So what?" Sophia spat. "We can't undo the past. This is ridiculous." But as she spoke, her reflection in the goblet warped, her face twisting into a grim, silent scream. The candles flickered, and when the light returned, Sophia was gone. Only Ryan and Lila remained. Lila clutched Ryan's arm, her pearls rattling against her chest. "What do we do? How do we stop this?" Ryan shook his head, staring at the chair. The whispers coalesced into a single voice, cold and accusing. "You never stopped. You never helped." The chair creaked as the 13th guest finally revealed itself. A shadowy figure, featureless and yet unmistakably human. Its presence was suffocating, its gaze heavy and unrelenting. "Please," Leela sobbed. "We're sorry." The figure raised a hand, and the last candle went out. When the storm cleared the next morning, the mansion was empty. The dining table sat undisturbed, 13 chairs neatly arranged. The goblets were full, but no one was there to drink. Locals who passed the mansion swore they could still hear the whispers, faint and mournful, calling from within. And the 13th chair remained, waiting. The end.